Chapter 2647. Statue's Forbidden Zone. With each step Feng took toward the majestic statue before him, the mental assault coming from it intensified. However, he kept advancing without being affected in the slightest, as if the mental assault was non-existent. 80 yards, 70 yards, 60 yards. After just a short moment, Feng arrived at the 50-yard mark and stood beside Violet Cloud. At this moment, though, his expression turned slightly serious. It was obvious that the statue's mental assaults were starting to affect him. However, everyone also understood that this was not his limit. Is he a monster? He actually caught up to Violet so quickly. Moreover, he's not even at his limit yet. Fei, who was seated nearby, stared at Feng in shock. Just what did he do during this period to improve so much? Players that had never attempted mental condensation before might not know how much improvement Feng just displayed. However, everyone present who had been continuously honing their mental condensation and resisting the statue's mental assaults for more than 10 hours now, knew exactly how much Feng had improved. While Feng's shattering the mental assault at the 85-yard mark might seem very amazing, the mental assault weakened with distance. The 85-yard mental assault was incomparable to the 50-yard mental assault. In fact, Fei had doubted that Feng could even resist the 50-yard mental assault. As for Violet Cloud, her talent was clear for all to see. Violet Cloud's talent was so great that Fei found it to be mind-boggling. Hence, when she saw Feng's mental condensation standard and improvement speed losing out to Violet Cloud's, she did not find it surprising at all. Moreover, Violet Cloud was a magical class player, which gave her an advantage over melee players when it came to mental condensation. This point was clear from everyone's training results during this period. Therefore, it was very normal for Feng to be inferior to Violet Cloud. Now, however, Feng had actually surpassed Violet Cloud, shattering even the 50-yard mental assault. This situation was truly surprising. After all, Feng had been training his mental condensation outside the 100-yard mark. Trying to improve one's mental condensation at that distance was much more difficult. This was something they had tested for themselves during their break periods. However, even under such a situation, Feng had still managed to surpass Violet Cloud. The amount of talent he possessed was simply ludicrous. While Fei was in a daze, Feng had arrived at the 30-yard mark. And upon retaliating against the mental assault here, he stumbled back one step, his complexion immediately turning pale. It seems it's going to be difficult to get any closer than this. The power of the mental assault here is already several times that of the 50-yard mental assault. It's no wonder so many people couldn't reach and cross the 30-yard mark in the past. When Feng tried retaliating against the 30-yard mental assault, he had instantly lost 1/15 of his maximum concentration. This was no longer a loss he could afford. In the past, the area within 30 yards of Divine Will statues had been considered a forbidden zone. According to rumors, anyone that managed to train within this zone would see a qualitative leap in their mental condensation standard. Although this improvement would not provide players with a substantial boost in combat power, it would hone their perception of mana to inhuman levels, as well as facilitate the formation of their magic domain when they reached Tier 4. It was even rumored that the improvement one received from training within the Forbidden Zone could provide significant help when challenging the Tier 5 promotion quest. Meanwhile, upon seeing Feng finally fail, Aqua Rose and the others could not help a sigh of relief. After all, if Feng were to get any closer to the statue, they would really start suspecting that they were severely lacking in talent. Although I can't train efficiently at the 30-yard mark, training at the 35-yard mark isn't a bad option either. With this, I shouldn't need more than 2 days to raise my concentration to the Tier 4 standard. Feng could not help but sigh when he looked at the Forbidden Zone before him. However, he wasn't too disappointed. In its current state, divine change was still incomplete. Originally, he thought that he would be fortunate if he could train at the 50-yard mark with the help of the combat technique. After all, he could exert only 15% of his body's muscles in the same direction. He still couldn't unify the strength of the remainder of his body. Hence, he was already quite satisfied with his current results. As for entering the Divine Will's Forbidden Zone, so long as he could perfect divine change, it should not be a problem at all. Following which, Feng returned to the 35-yard mark and started absorbing the Divine Will there, improving his concentration. As he continuously absorbed Divine Will and raised his maximum concentration, the number of players that got resurrected and entered Lightforged City also increased. When the many members of Violet Sword and Azure saw Feng and the others sitting in front of one of the statues on the city walls, they were bemused. I really don't know what those people from Zero Wing are doing. They're actually wasting time sitting before a statue. Do they not know that the peace outside has already shattered completely? Crimson Star could not help her puzzlement when she read the report her subordinate sent her regarding the activities of Zero Wing's members. Violet Swords and Azure's members were all doing their best to improve their combat power in Lightforged City. Zero Wing's members, on the other hand, had wasted 2 whole days doing nothing. Aside from occasionally leaving their position to have a meal at Lightforged City's restaurants, they had spent all their time sitting before one of the statues erected on the city walls. Rather than coming here to train, Zero Wing's members looked as if they were on vacation. Zero Wing probably has its own considerations. After all, when it comes to peak experts, it is already superior to ordinary superpowers, Wildfighter said. Moreover, after the partnership this time, I heard that Azure plans to ally itself with Zero Wing. Afterward, Zero Wing will have a much smoother path ahead of it. Ally? So what if Azure allies with Zero Wing? Let alone Azure, even some super guilds are failing to cope with the current situation. How can Azure possibly have the time to help Zero Wing? Crimson Star said disdainfully. In addition, peak experts are no longer as effective as they were before. The various powers have already researched plenty of war weapons. The usefulness of Tier 3 players is continuously diminishing. Nowadays, Zerg tactics rule the battlefield. Since guild towns and cities no longer enjoyed the protection of NPC soldiers, guilds had lost their greatest assurance. Players no longer had to fear overly powerful NPC soldiers and were free to cause trouble inside guild towns and cities. This was especially good news for powerful experts and developing powers with limited territory. In fact, according to Violet Sword's intelligence network, over 200 guild towns on the western continent had switched owners since the activation of the Demon God's Chaos expansion pack. And while the various superpowers still hadn't suffered any losses due to this expansion pack, that was mainly because of the large number of Tier 3 experts and peak experts they possessed. Zero Wing, however, was significantly inferior to the various superpowers in this regard. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. This isn't something we need to concern ourselves about. Instructor Tori has just sent news that some of the secretly developing superpowers have started stirring recently. So once we complete our training here, he wants us to station our trump card legion in the 2 guild cities closest to level 100 maps as insurance, Wildfighter said. I understand. Once our time here is up, I'll bring the men over, Crimson Star replied, nodding. Meanwhile, as Crimson Star and Wildfighter were conversing, Feng, who was sitting quietly before one of the city wall statues, suddenly opened his eyes. At the same time, an invisible ripple spread out from his body, weakening the Divine Will's mental assault considerably. Success. Chapter 2648, Tier 4 Concentration. When the strange ripple appeared from Feng's body, Aqua Rose and the others present promptly noticed it. At the same time, they felt a mental pressure from Feng that they had never felt before. Although this mental pressure was far weaker than what the Divine Will statues radiated, it was inherently the same. Guild leader, did you break through? Aqua Rose could not help asking as she looked at Feng. Although she understood that Feng had achieved a breakthrough, she still wanted confirmation. The difficulty of raising concentration was far greater than she had expected. Even now she could sense that she was still far from a breakthrough. Even Violet Cloud, whose mental condensation standard was second only to Feng's, had a long way to go. 30% or so to reach the Tier 4 standard and its concomitant qualitative transformation. I've reached the Tier 4 standard already, Feng said, nodding happily as he focused his mind on experiencing the changes brought about by having his concentration reach the Tier 4 standard. This was a realm that he was never able to reach in the past no matter what he did. Even though only his concentration had reached the Tier 4 standard for now, it was already more than enough to excite him. In God's domain, Tier 4 was a major turning point for players, a far more important one than when players went from Tier 2 to Tier 3. One could say that more than 99% of Tier 3 players would never be able to reach Tier 4. In order to reach Tier 4, aside from sufficiently high combat standards and equipment standards, one also needed a lot of luck and fortuitous opportunities. If a player lacked any of these factors, the difficulty of reaching Tier 4 would increase exponentially. Now, with Shifeng's concentration at the Tier 4 standard, his chances of attaining Tier 4 in the future had just increased significantly. Guild leader, what does it feel like to have Tier 4 concentration? Is the difference large? Xianxia asked, curious. Upon hearing Xianxia's question, everyone turned to Shifeng with inquisitive eyes. It's large. It's very large, Shifeng answered after giving the matter some thought. You can say that I've already reached a completely different level. The improvement of the concentration attribute would provide a significant increase in a player's control over their physical body and mana. The concentration attribute reaching the Tier 4 standard would even bring about a qualitative transformation. Take the Holy Annihilation mana technique for example. If executing Light Shadow cost him 10 points of concentration previously, then now it required only 3 points. As for the concentration cost of executing bronze combat techniques, it had dropped even further. Now he could basically use bronze combat techniques as if they were advanced combat techniques. In addition, even executing Tier 3 skills and spells at a 100% completion rate would probably no longer be difficult. Even breaking through the 100% threshold was entirely doable. Is the difference really that great? Aqua Rose could not help her incredulity. Although I do not wish to say this, the difference is indeed like heaven and earth. Right now, in a situation where I have the same basic attributes, I'm certain my current self can defeat my previous self in less than 10 moves, Shifeng replied, chuckling when he saw the skeptical look Aqua Rose was giving him. Only after his concentration reached the Tier 4 standard did he truly understand how big the gap between Tier 3 and Tier 4 was. It was no wonder the Tier 4 experts in the past could trounce a group of Tier 3 peak experts, with some Tier 4 experts even able to capture a guild town single-handedly. The reason for this wasn't the powerful basic attributes Tier 4 players had but their control over their physical body and mana, which had reached a whole new realm. Even with the same physical body, Shifeng had now doubled his combat power at the very least. Moreover, the cost of exertion had been drastically reduced. Now even Zerg tactics were useless against him. In his current state he could truly destroy an army of players all by himself. The improvement is that much? Eluofei was astonished by Shifeng's example. Before, their guild leader could already be considered invincible among Tier 3 existences. After all, he had overwhelmed the ancient Secret Lands Tier 4 region chiefs. Now, however, he was claiming that his Tier 4 concentration would let him defeat his previous self in less than 10 moves. At this point, she no longer dared imagine how powerful he currently was. Even actual Tier 4 players might not be a match for him. Alright, we don't have much time left. Hurry up and continue absorbing the divine will. It'll be quite some time before you can enter here again, Shifeng said, chuckling as he looked at everyone's yearning expressions. The alchemy array they used lasted only 7 days and had a 10-day cooldown. Even if everyone gained the right to stay in Lightforged City for as long as they wanted, they would still have to leave the city for at least 3 days before they could enter again. In addition, whenever they entered the ancient secret land, they had to spend a lot of time traveling to Lightforged City. Overall, they didn't really have much time to train here. At Shifeng's reminder, everyone promptly resumed absorbing the Tier 4 divine will the statue before them radiated. Although raising their concentration to the Tier 4 standard was incredibly difficult, just absorbing the divine will would still bring about a quantitative improvement to their concentration. Hence, they naturally couldn't waste the remaining time they had left in Lightforged City. Right, Violet, how close are you to achieving a breakthrough? Shifeng asked as he turned to Violet Cloud, who was preparing to resume her training. Just a while ago, Violet Cloud had advanced to the 40-yard mark and was very close to reaching his training spot already. Hence, her absorption rate of divine will was just slightly slower than his. I feel that I need to raise my concentration by another 20% or so before I hit the Tier 3 limit, Violet Cloud replied after sensing the current state of her concentration. Only 20%? That quick? Her answer stunned Shifeng. She was clearly still around 30% away from reaching the Tier 3 limit just now. He never thought that she could progress so rapidly. Taking out the 2 master concentration recovery potions he had left, he said, I still have 2 unused potions, take them. You're giving them to me? But what about everyone else? Violet Cloud automatically hesitated when she saw the 2 potions in Shifeng's hand. The master concentration recovery potion was incredibly valuable. If she had to do quests and slowly accumulate the required contribution points to exchange for them, it would take ages before she would have enough points for one potion. If Feng gave both of his remaining potions to her now, it would be unfair to everyone else. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. You take them. You're the closest to achieving a breakthrough now. If your concentration can reach the Tier 4 standard, it'll be a great help to the guild. Aqua and the others will be happy to see that as well, Feng assured her. Giving the potions to someone else might be fine if Violet Cloud's concentration was still a long way from reaching the Tier 4 standard. However, since she was only 20% short of reaching the Tier 3 limit and her Divine Will absorption rate was only slightly inferior to his own, the 2 additional Master Concentration Recovery Potions might help her cross the threshold. Knowing this, he would naturally give both bottles to her. After all, so long as Violet Cloud's concentration reached the Tier 4 standard, Zero Wing would gain another true powerhouse. Guild leader, I definitely won't disappoint you and everyone else. I'll make sure my concentration reaches the Tier 4 standard by the time we leave Lightforged City. Violet Cloud said with determination as she accepted the 2 potions. She then returned to her training spot and focused fully on resisting the approaching mental assaults. As for Feng, he made his way to a quiet corner and shifted his attention to his bag space. Now that my concentration has reached the Tier 4 standard, it should be enough to accept this legacy. Feng's eyes shone with anticipation as he looked at the gigantic memory crystal sitting in his bag space. Chapter 2649 Astonishing Ancient Legacy Lightforged City, Crimson Silver Hotel. As a hotel that catered to Lightforged City's nobles, the Crimson Silver Hotel was off-limits to ordinary players and NPCs. The cost of resting in this prestigious hotel was similarly far beyond that of ordinary hotels. Any normal room within the hotel cost 300 magic crystals or 10 contribution points to rent per day. Even Crimson Star and the others, who had become nobles of Lightforged City due to the Noble Authority token, were unwilling to rest here. At this moment, however, Feng entered the hotel without hesitation, stunning the members of Violet Sword and Azure that saw him. Be it 300 magic crystals or 10 contribution points, neither was cheap. Paying such a high price just for some rest was an unnecessary extravagance. Renting a room in an ordinary hotel for the price of 30 magic crystals or 1 contribution point was more than enough. My lord, how may I be of service? A level 180 female attendant asked respectfully as she approached Feng. I wish to rent a normal room here, Feng said as he handed 300 magic crystals to the attendant. Very well, the female attendant said after verifying the payment. She then took out a crystalline key and gave it to Feng, saying, My lord, here is your room key. You may choose any of the empty rooms upstairs. After accepting the key, Feng promptly made his way to the 2nd floor and entered one of the unoccupied rooms there. As soon as he entered the guest room, the mana density inside actually started rising rapidly. Just a short moment later, the ambient mana had more than doubled already. In addition, the mana here also gave him a soothing and calming feeling. Sure enough, the mana density here is much higher than in ordinary hotels. Feng nodded in satisfaction when he sensed the room's environment. If he merely wanted some rest, he would have gone to an ordinary hotel. However, he didn't intend to rest, but to obtain the ancient legacy recorded inside the memory crystal. Hence he could not afford to be careless. The noble hotel was much safer than the ordinary hotels in the city. This point was obvious just by looking at its attendants and guards. Every NPC here was at least a level 180 Tier 3 NPC. They were not existences current players could afford to provoke. In addition, the noble hotel was protected by a ridiculously strong 4-fold defensive magic array. Under normal circumstances, even Tier 5 existences would pose no threat to this magic array, let alone Tier 3 and Tier 4 existences. Now that Feng no longer had to worry about external disruptions, he immediately took out the memory crystal from his bag and readied himself to read its contents. The memory crystal he obtained would remain in existence for only 2 natural days. He had already spent a lot of this time raising his concentration standard. Now he had less than 3 hours left to read it. Now that my concentration has reached the Tier 4 standard, I should be able to read it, right? Feng could not help being nervous as he tapped his finger on the memory crystal. On this trip to the ancient secret land, his greatest harvest would definitely have to be the memory crystal. In fact, Everything else he obtained from this trip couldn't even come close to half the value of this memory crystal. If he still couldn't read the information contained in it, then he really would die from heartache. In the next moment, the sound of a system notification entered his ears. System, warning. You have discovered a large memory crystal. According to your current concentration, if you read the recorded information completely, there is a very small chance you will enter a deep coma. Do you still wish to read the information? There's still a risk? Faux was stunned when he saw the system notification. Just what is in this thing? Although the Tier 4 standard was not the apex of God's domain, it was definitely above average. Even a king had to take Tier 4 existences seriously. Now, however, despite his concentration having reached the Tier 4 standard already, reading the recorded information still involved a bit of risk. This was simply unbelievable. Although there is a risk, I want to see what is recorded in this thing. Gritting his teeth, Faux chose to read the information in the memory crystal. Memory crystals that contained ancient legacies were incredibly rare in God's domain. In fact, they could be counted on the fingers of one's hands. Previously, due to the very large chance of him falling into a deep coma, Faux did not dare read the recorded information. However, now that the risk had become very small, he naturally had to try. After all, he wouldn't get another opportunity like this again in the future. After he chose to read the contents of the memory crystal, the large crystal in his hand started rapidly gathering mana from its surroundings. It then released a dazzling glow that brightly illuminated the entire room. Afterward, a beam of white light shot out from the memory crystal and into Feng's forehead. For a time, Feng sensed countless images and texts being transferred into his brain. The amount of the information was simply astonishing. It felt as if he had just plunged into a sea of knowledge. 10 minutes, 20 minutes, an hour. For the first half hour, Feng still felt fine after receiving the copious information. However, after the transfer process continued for 40 minutes, he felt a stinging in his head as if someone was using a needle to poke his brain. Meanwhile, as time passed, this stinging sensation only intensified. After 80 minutes into the transfer process, Feng felt as if his brain was about to explode. Right then, the beam the memory crystal released disappeared. Immediately afterward, the crystal shattered into countless fragments and vanished from the room. As for Feng, his body swayed slightly as his mind was in a mess. And when he opened his eyes, the world spun around him. How close! If the transfer process had continued for a few more minutes, I might have fainted. At this moment, Feng felt that the system had tricked him. Despite the warning stating that there was only a very small chance for him to fall into a deep coma, he was clearly very close to breaching the mental protection system, which would have forced him into a deep coma for a very long time. Then he would definitely die of regret. However, after resting for a few minutes, Feng started feeling much better, the pain in his head having lessened significantly. Meanwhile, the information he had received also came into focus. This is a lie, right? A small, mobile fortress design? Stunned, Feng wondered if the system was playing a joke on him when he looked at the images and texts displayed before him. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU in God's domain, fortresses were much more valuable than towns. After all, aside from providing players with a place to rest, fortresses possessed far greater offensive and defensive capabilities than towns. They were shelters made for all kinds of warfare. Even a small fortress could easily fend off the assault of a large number of Tier 4 existences. Moreover, fortresses had much lower production costs and operation costs. Hence, they had been highly popular among the various powers in the past. During Feng's previous life, over 70% of the player shelters found in level 100+ maps were fortresses. However, the design currently displayed before him was a cut above even ordinary fortresses. In fact, even during his previous life, he had the fortune to witness such constructions only a few times. This construction was the mobile fortress. It was a fortress that could drive countless powers crazy. Chapter 2650, Small Mobile Fortress. No wonder the recorded information is so massive. Thankfully, the information is only for a small mobile fortress. Had it been for a medium mobile fortress, even concentration at the peak of Tier 4 wouldn't have been sufficient to read it. Realization dawned upon Feng when he saw the details regarding the small mobile fortress design. On the surface, The difference between a normal fortress and a mobile fortress might not seem very large, with one stationary and the other mobile. However, the difference distinguishing them was far from just mobility. In the construction of a normal fortress, the construction materials had priority, while magic arrays were secondary. For a mobile fortress, it was the opposite. The magic arrays took priority while materials were secondary. A mobile fortress could also be labeled a magic fortress. The two constructions were on entirely different levels of complexity. From what Faux could see, just the magic arrays required to construct the small mobile fortress numbered several thousand. Moreover, even the weakest of them was a basic master magic array. One could easily imagine how complex of a construction a mobile fortress was. If the design he received were for a medium mobile fortress, its complexity would be even more frightening, most likely boasting tens of thousands of magic arrays. Just thinking of this number gave him the shivers. However, when Faux took a closer look at the details of the small mobile fortress design, he did not know whether he should cry or laugh. A mobile fortress was something countless powers had yearned to obtain in his previous life. In fact, the superpowers had even been willing to exchange a main city for a mobile fortress. This was despite the exceptionally high difficulty of upgrading a guild city into a main city. A lot of time and effort were needed to obtain a main city. However, even when offered a main city, there had never been any power that was willing to part with their mobile fortress. After all, a mobile fortress was an aerial base. Even though a small mobile fortress's size wasn't comparable to that of a basic town, in a situation where flying mounts were incredibly rare and very few guild cities could get established in level 100 plus maps, a mobile fortress was worth far more than 3 main cities. In the past, any power that possessed a mobile fortress had been a target of partnership for the various superpowers. Countless independent peak experts and top adventurer teams would also do whatever they could to gain the qualifications to enter a mobile fortress. Some first-rate guilds that were fortunate enough to obtain a mobile fortress had even instantly become pseudo-superpowers as a result. Moreover, none of the superpowers wished to offend them. Now, although Faux did not obtain an actual mobile fortress, he had the design to make one. Moreover, as an intermediate master magician, he could build a mobile fortress now and instantly stabilize Zero Wing's position in God's domain. This was definitely a matter worth celebrating. However, after studying the design, Faux also discovered a headache. While he indeed possessed the mobile fortress design as well as the necessary skills to construct it, the mobile fortress's material cost was stratospheric. Setting aside the various materials necessary for the several thousand magic arrays, just the materials for the basic structure of the mobile fortress were already more than enough to make any superpower in the current God's domain faint. 8 million magic crystals, 30,000 mana stones, 2 million pieces of mana ore. Although these were all generally available on the market, the amounts required were not something ordinary superpowers could afford. Not to mention, the construction of the small mobile fortress also needed various other valuable materials such as magic metal. By Feng's rough estimates, completing the small mobile fortress would cost a minimum of 50 million gold. Let alone ordinary superpowers, even veteran superguilds would need a long time to collect such an enormous sum of money. Ordinary superpowers would be fortunate to have a liquid fund of 3 or 4 million gold. Even 10 ordinary superpowers combined wouldn't be able to fork out 50 million gold unless they sold off their assets. However, doing so would be akin to putting the cart before the horse. Before they could even finish constructing the mobile fortress, they would have caused the collapse of their guilds already. Most importantly, coins weren't the main problem. After all, coins were the most basic form of currency in God's domain. However, it was a different story for magic crystals, mana stones and mana oregon. Aside from being hard currency, they were also essential items for players to get by. Whether it was now or in the future, this fact would remain true. Hence, the difficulty of obtaining all these materials was much greater than the difficulty of accumulating 50 million gold. Since the minimum material cost alone is already 50 million gold, it's no wonder no powers were willing to sell their mobile fortresses and would even refuse to accept main city ranked guild cities. If it were up to me, I definitely wouldn't make such an exchange either. Faux could not help a bitter smile when he saw the list of required materials. The value of a main city-ranked guild city indeed surpassed 50 million gold. However, 50 million gold was only the material cost of a small mobile fortress. Moreover, this was under ideal market conditions. Magic crystals, mana stones and mana ore were in low supply and high demand in God's domain. Just collecting the necessary amount to construct a small mobile fortress would most definitely cause a shortage, which would in turn raise their prices. In the end, the material cost would definitely far exceed 50 million gold. In fact, 100 million gold might not even be enough to pay for all the necessary materials. After factoring in the time and labor costs, one would make a loss if they sold their mobile fortress for less than 200 million gold. With Zero Wing's current strength, obtaining the required magic crystals and mana stones shouldn't be a problem. It'll just take some time. However, gathering 2 million pieces of mana ore is a problem. With the Philosopher's Stone's help, he could easily convert magic crystals into mana stones. Overall, he needed just 9.5 million magic crystals, which shouldn't be a big problem for the current Zero Wing, as the guild was earning a large amount of magic crystals through the Starlight Fortress, Stone Forest City, and the Dark World's teleportation gate. However, it was a different story for mana ore again. On the surface, mana ore was cheaper than magic crystals. Ordinary players normally wouldn't have any use for mana ore again. Only the various powers would occasionally make use of it to construct buildings. However, the production of mana ore was also significantly lower than that of magic crystals because mana ore was an associated ore with only a certain chance of appearing when harvesting ores containing dense mana. In addition, the various superpowers were treating mana ore as a strategic resource and would not sell it unless absolutely necessary. The difficulty of collecting 2 million pieces of mana ore was far greater than the difficulty of collecting 9.5 million magic crystals. Although we currently have an alliance with the Azure Chamber of Commerce and can also source some from the Secret Pavilion, purchasing such a large amount of mana ore will definitely attract the attention of some superpowers. If these superpowers start interfering, it'll become even more difficult to collect mana ore again. Seems I have to secure some grade 2 or grade 3 ore veins. If he tried purchasing the uncommonly used mana ore in bulk, just the price inflation alone would already present a problem. Currently, due to a sharp increase in member count, Zero Wing's daily expenditure had likewise increased substantially. He also needed funds to support the development of the guild's Night Legion, towns, cities and airport. Now, let alone purchasing 2 million pieces of mana ore, Zero Wing didn't even have the funds necessary to purchase 500,000 pieces. Then when the guild's members started challenging their Tier 4 promotion quest, the guild would also have to invest a lot of funds and resources to assist them. Overall, Zero Wing was extremely short of funds right now. The only way he could secure a large amount of mana ore now was to acquire a grade 3 ore vein or better. That way, not only could he obtain a long-term supply of mana ore, but he also wouldn't have to worry about interference from the various superpowers. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Meanwhile, as Faux was pondering how to go about obtaining such an ore vein, he suddenly received a call request from Aqua Rose. Guild leader, something big happened to the Purple Thorns Kingdom. Aqua Rose reported anxiously. Something big happened? What is it? Faux asked, curious. Due to the Demon God's Chaos Expansion Pack, the entire God's domain had fallen into turmoil and guild wars were being waged daily. With how large the Purple Thorns Kingdom was, it would be strange if nothing happened there. The Purple Thorns Kingdom is no more. Chapter 2651, Kingdom perishes. The Purple Thorns Kingdom is no more? How did it disappear? Faux was momentarily stunned when he heard Aqua Rose's report. Although there were over 100 kingdoms in God's domain, the strength these kingdoms possessed was no trivial matter. In the case of the Purple Thorns Kingdom, it was average among the various kingdoms in existence. Although it was smaller than Starmoon Kingdom, its national power was only slightly weaker than that of Starmoon Kingdom. Hence, Faux found it hard to imagine that there would be anything capable of destroying a kingdom like the Purple Thorns Kingdom. In the past, kingdoms had started rising and perishing only when quite a number of players had already reached Tier 4 and were preparing to challenge their Tier 5 promotion quest. In the current God's domain, however, let alone preparing to challenge the Tier 5 promotion quest, there wasn't even a single Tier 4 player in existence. It was utterly impossible for players to destroy an entire kingdom. If not for Faux knowing that Aqua Rose would not joke about such an important matter, he really would think that she was kidding him. We still don't know the exact details. All we know is that the entire Purple Thorns Kingdom has been isolated from the outside world. According to the players that managed to escape from the kingdom before its isolation, powerful monsters had suddenly appeared in the Purple Thorns Kingdom, and these monsters were aggressively targeting players. At the same time, all NPCs at Tier 3 and above within the kingdom's NPC towns and cities had either disappeared or were placed in a strange state where they could not do combat. As a result, these newly appeared powerful monsters quickly overran the various NPC towns and cities. Moreover, any players killed by these monsters lose 10 levels and have their souls placed in an extremely weakened state, preventing them from logging into God's domain for 10 days. As for the corpses of these players, they are turned into either monsters themselves or food to strengthen these monsters. This incident has already shaken the entire Eastern continent. Every power is sending people to investigate this matter. The Black Dragon Empire and several kingdoms neighboring the Purple Thorns Kingdom have even dispatched their NPC armies to the Purple Thorns Kingdom's border to investigate. However, until now, nobody has managed to obtain any information. On the contrary, the players sent to investigate ended up getting ambushed and killed by the monsters there. Aqua Rose was similarly shocked when she received the news. She never thought that an incident like this would actually happen in God's domain. It might be understandable if it were an NPC city that suffered destruction, but the annihilation of an entire kingdom was simply unimaginable. Moreover, even now, nobody knew what exactly had happened to the Purple Thorns Kingdom. This situation made the players operating in the neighboring kingdoms and empires nervous, afraid that their country would become the next Purple Thorns Kingdom. If that happened, then all the time and effort they'd spent establishing a foundation in their respective countries would be wasted. The various powers that had been developing in the Purple Thorns Kingdom in particular were close to going crazy now. In order to develop in the Purple Thorns Kingdom, the various powers had purchased large tracts of real estate there. They had even constructed numerous guild towns and cities. However, because of the Purple Thorns Kingdom's fall, all of these investments were gone. Many guilds had even collapsed because of this incident. Just thinking of this matter made Aqua Rose shudder. Killed players are turned into either monsters or food that goes to improving the monsters. When Feng heard Aqua Rose's statement, the name of one person came to mind. However, he soon shook his head in denial. Although Beast Emperor possesses the evil god's legacy, he shouldn't be capable of rendering so many powerful NPCs incapable of combat and even destroying the Purple Thorns Kingdom. In the past, the evil god's temple had indeed caused many problems for the Eastern continent. However, by the time the evil god's temple had become a real threat, quite a number of players had already reached Tier 4. Moreover, the evil beasts of the evil god's temple required a lot of time to build up their strength. In fact, let alone the current evil god's temple, even when the evil god's temple had been at its peak in the past, it couldn't destroy an entire kingdom so quickly. Guild leader, because of this matter, the entire guild is in chaos. Many hidden powers are trying to take advantage of this situation. The players and powers that escaped from the Purple Thorns Kingdom in particular are now waging war over the various resource spots in Starmoon Kingdom. The entire Starmoon Kingdom is in a mess, Aqua Rose said in frustration. Moreover, many of Starmoon Kingdom's players have started migrating to other kingdoms and empires, which has led to a drop in the player populations of the kingdom's cities. The kingdom's economy is now plummeting. I understand. Have Fire and the others get ready. We'll return to Starmoon Kingdom immediately, Feng said, nodding. Originally, he had planned to partner with Azure to visit the neutral sea zone off the Silvermoon Empire and see if they could occupy one of the islands there. If he had a guild town in that neutral sea zone, it would serve as a foundation for Zero Wing to develop its naval strength on the western continent. At this point, the accessible resource spots on the main continent were mostly occupied already. There were barely any resource spots left for Zero Wing to claim. To develop on the western continent, Zero Wing would have to occupy a level 100+ neutral map or develop out at sea. However, establishing a foothold in a level 100+ neutral map was easier said than done. Not even the local superpowers could pull it off. Hence, Feng had decided to let Zero Wing develop in the western continent's neutral sea zones. Given the current situation, however, it would seem that his plan was no longer viable. What about Violet? Her concentration should be close to reaching the Tier 4 standard already. If we leave now, Aqua Rose had to ask. Let her stay here and continue training. The rest of us will head back first, Feng decided. Moreover, we also need a powerful expert to safeguard our territories here on the Western continent. I understand. I'll contact Fire and the others now and have them get ready, Aqua Rose said before disconnecting the call and gathering the other members of Zero Wing. As for Shifeng, he did not idle around but contacted Duan Hanshan right away. Guild leader Black Flame, seeing as you're contacting me so suddenly at this time, you've probably received news about the Purple Thorns Kingdom as well and wish to have Azure help you return to the Eastern Continent, right? Duan Hanshan said, smiling as he caressed his beard. Elder Hanshan really is amazing. That's right. We plan to return to the Eastern Continent. However, trying to send back 100 players is a little difficult for us, so we'll need your chamber's help, Shifeng said, nodding. Of course, we will pay the fees according to market price. Currently, the interactions between the two main continents were growing. Some superpowers capable of intercontinental travel had even started offering teleportation services. Ordinary powers still lacked the qualifications to utilize these services. However, now that Zero Wing and Azure were allies, Azure naturally wouldn't refuse to teleport Zero Wing's members back to the Eastern Continent. Guild leader Black Flame, you're being too polite. Our two guilds have just become allies, so let's just set the fee aside, Duan Hanshan said, waving his hand. We only hope that we can send some of our guild's young talents to interact and train at your guild. May I know if guild leader Black Flame can do us this favor? Of course, that won't be a problem. Only by interacting with each other can we improve more quickly. This is a good thing for both of us. How can I possibly refuse? Shifeng replied, slightly surprised by Duan Hanshan's proposal. He never thought that the Azure Chamber of Commerce would consider such an action. This offer was good news for Shifeng. After all, he was basically getting free labor. Moreover, he could tell that Azure was expressing its goodwill to Zero Wing. He naturally wouldn't reject such an offer. In that case, thank you, Guild Leader Black Flame, Duan Hanshan said. Afterward, all you need to do is head to Purple Light City with your team. Solitary Frost and the others will bring you all to the teleportation point. All right. Shifeng nodded before disconnecting the call. He then left the guest room he rented and made his way to Lightforge City's teleportation plaza. After Zero Wing's members gathered at the teleportation plaza, they promptly left the ancient secret land. Solitary Frost's team of 40 then led Zero Wing's members toward a teleportation point leading to the Eastern Continent. Guild leader Black Flame, given the number of people this time, we can only make use of this random teleportation array. When it activates, everyone will be teleported to a random location on the Eastern Continent. So we'll have to travel to Star Moon Kingdom independently, Solitary Frost said as he pointed at the ancient ruin before them. That won't be a problem, Shifeng said, nodding. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU of the teleportation arrays that allowed intercontinental travel, the ones capable of teleporting a large number of players generally did not have fixed destinations. Although this feature was somewhat troublesome, this trouble was nothing compared to the benefits one could gain from intercontinental travel. Seeing that Shifeng had no objections, Solitary Frost took out a key and activated the ruin's teleportation array. Immediately, a gigantic black hole appeared in the middle, rapidly depleting the ambient mana. Quick! This teleportation passage stays open for only 15 seconds. Once it disappears, we can reactivate it only after 10 days. Solitary Frost said hurriedly. After Solitary Frost's warning, Shifeng and the others promptly jumped into the black hole and disappeared from the ancient ruin. Chapter 2652, Eastern Continent God's Domain, Eastern Continent. In a vast desert, a black hole with a 6-meter radius suddenly appeared. All mana within a 50-yard radius promptly surged toward it as if summoned. In the blink of an eye, the area around the black hole became a manaless area that players could not survive in. At the same time as this manaless area formed, a figure emerged from the black hole and landed on the sandy ground. Although the vicinity was devoid of mana, the body of this figure was actually wrapped in a dense layer of mana and remained utterly unaffected by the harsh environment. I'm finally out. Shifeng stared in disgust at the gradually dissipating black hole. That ancient ruin's random teleportation array is simply a scam. Other random teleportation arrays teleport players directly to their destination, yet this one actually makes players go through a spatial maze first. If I couldn't fly, I would have most likely been stuck inside that spatial maze for about 5 or 6 hours. He had used random teleportation arrays in God's domain before, but this was definitely the first time he had come across such a bizarre random teleportation array. Entering the black hole on the western continent transported him into a gigantic spatial maze, and he had to search for the exit himself. However, that still wasn't the worst part. What was worse were the many void creatures inside the maze. Fortunately, these void creatures were only around level 120, and the majority of them were at the Great Lord standard only. Moreover, he possessed Gale Domain, which granted him the ability to fly, so he was able to easily shake off the monsters chasing after him and search for the exit quickly. After inwardly grumbling a little, Feng took out a return scroll for White River City. He wanted to take a look at White River City's condition immediately. However, when Feng unfurled the return scroll and started activating it, the sound of a system notification immediately entered his ears. System. A strange energy is sealing this area. All forms of teleportation cannot be used here. I can't teleport here? Feng frowned upon seeing this notification. Was I unlucky and got teleported to a forbidden land? In God's domain, aside from some special locations, forbidden lands were the only places that prohibited the use of return scrolls. Meanwhile, the chances of a random teleportation array sending players into special locations were zero because such locations had to be entered using specific methods. As for forbidden lands, they only prevented players from teleporting out of them and not into them. It seems I have no choice but to fly out of this place. Having no better option, Feng stored his return scroll and took out the Thunder Eagle summoning flute. However, a second after he tried to summon the Thunder Eagle, he was dumbfounded once more. System. A strange energy is sealing this area. Flying mounts cannot be used. What is this place? It actually prohibits the use of flying mounts. Feng was truly stunned when he saw this system notification. As far as he remembered, forbidden lands generally did not prohibit the use of flying mounts. Those that did were usually level 150 plus forbidden lands. Even with his current self, he would not dare set foot into such high-level forbidden lands. The main reason for this wasn't him lacking levels but the possibility of Tier 5 world bosses spawning in level 150 plus forbidden lands. Against a Tier 5 world boss, even a player of his caliber would be no different from an ant. While Feng was grappling with this headache, a weak ripple of mana came from far away. He turned reflexively to look at its source, but the only thing he could make out was a bunch of ant-like figures fighting in the distance. By his estimates, those figures should be more than 1,500 yards away. What's going on? Feng was stupefied by this situation. 4 Tier 3 players, 1,500 yards was already the very limit of their visual range. At such a great distance, unless the other side was using large-scale destruction spells influencing a radius of several hundred yards, he shouldn't be able to sense any mana fluctuations from his position. However, such spells were definitely beyond the capabilities of Tier 3 magical class players. And from what he could see, the figures in question weren't using spells of such scale and power either. Is this an effect of having Tier 4 concentration? After giving the matter some thought, Feng could think of only this explanation for this situation. This discovery astonished him. No wonder I was never able to escape Tier 4 players once I got discovered. A perception range of 1,500 yards. This perception range was already on superhuman levels. The perception range Tier 3 players possessed couldn't even come close. Previously, no magical battles had taken place in his vicinity after his concentration had reached the Tier 4 standard. Moreover, he had been in a mana-rich environment, so he didn't sense any particular changes to his perception of mana. However, now that he had arrived in a place with very thin mana, he became extraordinarily sensitive to the changes in mana. Nonetheless, Feng did not dwell on the matter. With quick steps, he made his way toward the origin of the mana fluctuations since he could sense that the cause of these mana fluctuations were players. With the system map inaccessible, he couldn't tell where he was right now. Hence, collecting information about his current location was of utmost importance. Otherwise, he wouldn't even know how he could return to Starmoon Kingdom. Meanwhile, players were undoubtedly the best source of information. A short moment later, Feng arrived on a sand dune roughly 400 yards from the battlefield. Standing on the sand dune, he had an unobstructed view of the entire battlefield. Sure enough, they're players. Currently, a 200-man team of players was fighting several dozen strange monsters while protecting a dozen or so carriages and a group of NPCs. Faux Saint Saboteur. Elemental Creature, Great Lord. Level 112 HP 120, 000, 000/120, 000, 000, Faux Saint Destroyer. Elemental Creature, Grand Lord. Level 114 HP 450, 000, 000/450, 000, The bodies of these strange monsters were pure white, looking like white statues. Every one of these monsters brandished weapons and wore armor. Although they weren't very high-leveled, every one of them was using spells in combat. Moreover, they also possessed very high combat standards, with even the weakest among them at the 5th floor trial tower standard. As for the players fighting these monsters, they were all at level 110 or above. Although these players were coping against these monsters, it was obvious that they were at a disadvantage. If not for the team's 8 Tier 3 experts holding off the 2 Faux Saint Destroyers, the team would have long since suffered annihilation. Vice Commander Wind, we can't continue like this. 2 destroyers are already far beyond our capability, the male Tier 3 shield warrior tanking one of the Faux Saint Destroyers said as he turned to look at the female Tier 3 swordsman tackling the other Faux Saint Destroyer. The female swordsman in question was clad in crimson armor and wielded 2 swords. By relying on her profound footwork, she managed to evade the Faux Saint Destroyer's spells one after another. Occasionally she also landed an attack on the Grand Lord and dealt some damage. From her performance, it was clear that she was at the Flowing Water Realm's standard. After putting some distance between herself and the Faux Saint Destroyer before her, the female swordsman replied, "I know. I've already contacted the commander for reinforcements, but the commander's team is still some distance away. They'll need around 2 hours to reach us." 2 hours? We won't last that long. The Tier 3 shield warrior exclaimed, exasperated. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU currently, although they were pinning down the 2 Faux Saint Destroyers, the rest of the team had their hands full with the Faux Saint Saboteurs. Overall, their entire team was barely doing any damage to these monsters. Meanwhile, at the rate they were expending stamina, they wouldn't last more than an hour against these monsters. In regard to this situation, the female swordsman also could not help feeling frustrated. If it were possible, she would have given the command to escape. However, these Faux Saint monsters possessed an incredibly wide perception range. So long as players came across them, it was basically impossible to escape them. And even if they disregarded this fact and tried to flee, they would simply be making things worse. After all, this entire desert that they were in teemed with Faux Saint monsters. It was very easy for them to attract the attention of more Faux Saint monsters and put themselves in a worse situation. Just as everyone in the team was despairing, a voice suddenly entered their ears. "I'll lure these 2 Grand Lords away. The rest of you focus on getting rid of the Great Lords." Chapter 2653, Repelling Faux Saints. Upon hearing this voice, the merchant fleet's 200 players promptly turned to look toward its origin. What entered their sight was a cloaked swordsman carrying 2 long swords, who was rapidly closing in on their position, his speed surpassing even that of Tier 3 assassins. So fast. Solid Wind, the female swordsman, was surprised when she saw this swift figure. She never thought that they would actually come across other expert players in this desert. However, before anyone could react to this situation, this swordsman had already arrived before one of the 2 Faux Saint Destroyers. Upon noticing Feng appearing before it, the destroyer promptly raised its greatsword and smashed down at him. The descending greatsword split into 3 sword lights that struck at Feng from different directions, each of the sword lights leaving a spatial tear in its wake. "Be careful. You mustn't receive this move no matter what." Solid Wind warned hurriedly when she saw the descending sword lights. The Faux Saint Destroyer was ostensibly a Grand Lord, but the skills and spells it used could exhibit power at the Tier 4 standard. Moreover, its assault was generally relentless. Once it started attacking, it would continue chaining attacks one after another. So long as players revealed a hole in their defense, the Faux Saint Destroyer would use its strongest move to target said weakness. Meanwhile, the Faux Saint Destroyer's strongest attack was something even Tier 3 peak experts had difficulty dodging. A hit from this move would instantly kill even a Tier 3 metric tons. However, when Feng went up against the Faux Saint Destroyer's attack, He actually showed no intention of dodging. Instead, he unsheathed the pitch-black longsword hanging at his waist and took the initiative to meet the attack. Did he not hear Vice Commander Solid Wind's warning? The Tier 3 shield warrior who was tanking the other Faux Saint Destroyer was startled when he saw Shifeng's actions. In regard to this situation, the other Tier 3 experts on the team also could not help shaking their heads and sighing. Even their commander, who was their adventurer team's strongest expert, would not dare receive this move directly, choosing to dodge it instead before launching a counterattack. After all, so long as one clashed with this move, holes would inevitably appear in one's defense. If that happened, even 2 or 3 healers would not be enough to keep one alive. Although everyone present wished to help Shifeng, the Faux Saint Destroyer's attack was simply too fast. Nobody would make it in time. Damn it! Solid Wind gnashed her teeth when she saw this scene. They had just gained the help of a Tier 3 expert. While having an extra Tier 3 expert might not change the overall situation, it would increase the team's combat power and let them survive longer. With the swordsman's help, they might even be able to hold out until their commander's team arrived. Now, however, boom! The loud clash of metal against metal thundered. At the same time, a frightening shockwave swept into the surroundings, creating a miniature sandstorm around its epicenter. However, contrary to everyone's expectations, they did not see the swordsman's figure flying out of the sandstorm. Instead, the situation inside the sandstorm became strangely calm after the initial collision. When the sand settled, what entered everyone's eyes was the scene of Shifeng standing there quietly, his pitch-black longsword pushing against the Faux Saint Destroyer's silvery white greatsword. At this moment, not only was Shifeng unharmed, but he was still in his original position. He blocked it. How is that possible? Everyone's eyes nearly fell out of their sockets when they saw Shifeng unscathed and in place. The move the Faux Saint Destroyer just used carried power at the Tier 4 standard. Even a Tier 3 metric tons would stumble several steps backward when receiving this attack with their shield. However, far from making Shifeng stumble, the Faux Saint Destroyer's greatsword actually failed to budge his longsword by even an inch. It was as if the destroyer's greatsword had just smashed into an impenetrable wall. The most frightening thing about all of this was that Shifeng had used only one hand to stop the Faux Saint Destroyer's attack. How high is his strength? After seeing this astonishing scene, Solid Wind paid closer attention to Shifeng. Even her commander, who was fully geared in top-tier dark gold equipment and wielded an epic weapon, would not dare receive a Faux Saint Destroyer's attack directly, yet Shifeng blocked the attack so casually. This was simply unbelievable. However, before anyone could react to the situation, Shifeng swung the abyssal blade once more and sent a perfect crescent cutting at the Faux Saint Destroyer before him. Failing to defend itself in time, the destroyer took the hit and stumbled 5 steps back. At the same time, a damage exceeding -300,000 appeared above its head. The damage from Shifeng's attack was more than 5 times higher than what Solid Wind and the others managed to cause. Immediately afterward, Shifeng sent a crescent arc flying at the other Faux Saint Destroyer. This time, though, the targeted destroyer reacted in time, interposing its greatsword. The instant the crescent arc came into contact with the greatsword, the impact lifted the targeted Faux Saint Destroyer slightly off the ground and sent it flying 5 yards back. By the time the Faux Saint Destroyer managed to stabilize its body, silence filled the entire battlefield as the 200 players guarding the merchant fleet gaped in shock at the scene that had just taken place. Strong. Shifeng was simply too strong. The 2 Faux Saint Destroyers alone were more than capable of annihilating their 200-man team, yet Shifeng had suppressed both of them with just 2 casual moves. He was absolutely inhuman. Leave these 2 Faux Saint Destroyers to me. The rest of you quickly take care of those saboteurs. Shifeng shouted when he saw that everyone was staring at him in a daze. Got it. Upon hearing Shifeng's reminder, everyone promptly snapped out of their daze and resumed fighting the Faux Saint saboteurs without hesitation. In less than an hour, because of Shifeng pinning down the 2 Faux Saint Destroyers, the team was able to finish off 70% of the Faux Saint saboteurs present. After seeing that the tide of the battle was turning against them, the 2 Faux Saint Destroyers actually quit the field without hesitation. As for the surviving Faux Saint saboteurs, they similarly scattered and fled as well. They're escaping? What are these monsters? Shifeng was surprised to see the Faux Saint monsters fleeing. He had seen monsters abandon fights before. However, those monsters would generally turn tail only when their HPs had fallen to a critical level. On the other hand, the Faux Saint monsters that fled still had most of their HP. The two Faux Saint destroyers in particular were basically still at full HP. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. We don't know what exactly these Faux Saint monsters are. We only know that they came from Starmoon Kingdom's side. Moreover, every one of them possesses extremely high intellect. So long as they see that they have no chance of winning, they will scatter and flee immediately. This is especially true for those Faux Saint destroyers. Even now, we haven't heard of any team killing one, Solid Wind explained when she saw the confusion on Shifeng's face. They came from Starmoon Kingdom? Solid Wind's words surprised Shifeng. Curious, he asked, Vice Commander Wind, could we be very close to Starmoon Kingdom? As far as he knew, there were no maps close to Starmoon Kingdom that prohibited the use of teleportation, flying mounts, and the system map. Once we cross this desert area which is in the Orc Empire, we'll arrive at Starmoon Kingdom's fallen border, Solid Wind said as she eyed Shifeng strangely. After all, this information was common knowledge already. The Orc Empire? Starmoon Kingdom's fallen border? Shifeng grew even more confused at Solid Wind's words. Wasn't it the Purple Thorns Kingdom that has fallen? Chapter 2654. Obsolete Zero Wing? Upon hearing Shifeng's question, Solid Wind and the others gave him strange looks. Am I mistaken about something? Shifeng asked, puzzled by their reactions. The information Aqua Rose reported couldn't be false. Moreover, Duan Hanshan had also mentioned the matter of the Purple Thorns Kingdom falling. Even if Aqua Rose received the wrong information, there was no way a super guild like the Azure Chamber of Commerce would as well. You're not wrong, Solid Wind said, shaking her head. It's just that the fall of the Purple Thorns Kingdom happened 9 days ago. 9 days ago? Shifeng was stunned by Solid Wind's words. For a moment he wondered if she was trying to trick him. According to the information Zero Wing received, the Purple Thorns Kingdom had fallen only a day ago. Even if there was an error in the information, the time gap shouldn't be this large. The Purple Thorns Kingdom indeed fell 9 days ago. The incident shook the entire God's domain back then. The players and powers based in the kingdom were truly miserable, the Tier 3 shield warrior standing beside Solid Wind said, nodding. After that incident, many of the Purple Thorns Kingdom's players and powers banded together to plunder the resources of the neighboring kingdoms. The situation was so severe that 2 wars involving millions of players were waged. Many guilds collapsed as a result, 2 of them even second-rate guilds. The various major powers based in the neighboring kingdoms panicked. That's right. And 3 days ago, a horde of monsters emerged from the Purple Thorns Kingdom and invaded Starmoon Kingdom. Fortunately, Starmoon Kingdom did not face the predicament the Purple Thorns Kingdom had. All its Tier 3 NPCs and above remained in a combat-able state. Even so, in just half a day, nearly half of Starmoon Kingdom's territory was lost and became the nests of these Faux Saint monsters, Solid Wind explained when she saw the skepticism on Shifeng's face. Even after hearing Solid Wind's sincere explanation, Shifeng remained unconvinced. However, there was simply no reason for Solid Wind to lie to a stranger like him. Moreover, everyone's expression appeared natural. It did not seem as if they were faking anything. If these people were acting, then he really would have to tip his hat off to their strength. After all, unless one was at the Void Realm standard, avoiding the perception of a domain realm expert like himself would be very difficult. Only after reaching the Void Realm standard would people be able to control the minute actions their bodies made when lying. If Solid Wind and the others were truly lying, this meant that the entire 200-man team consisted of peak experts. Not even the 5 great super guilds had so many peak experts under their command. What is going on here? Shifeng could not make heads or tails of this matter. I spent at most 7 or 8 hours inside the spatial maze. How did I unknowingly waste 9 days? As soon as he received word of the Purple Thorns Kingdom's fall, he had hurried back to the eastern continent without hesitation. He didn't even log off midway. He also couldn't have fallen asleep during the journey and slept 9 whole days away. After all, he had remained fully conscious during his entire journey. 7 or 8 hours becoming 9 days. Shifeng suddenly thought of a possibility, and his complexion darkened at this thought. Did I enter a space with chaotic time? Normally, one would experience 48 hours a day in God's domain. However, in certain special locations time would flow much more quickly, and staying just half a day there would mean an entire month going by in the outside world. Moreover, during this entire month, players should not be interrupted lest they enter a coma and regain consciousness only after a long time. Fortunately, such cases rarely occurred in God's domain. In the past, Feng had only ever heard rumors of such situations happening. He never thought that he would experience it himself. In fact, there was a possibility that Aqua Rose and the others had been put into a similar situation as well. Right, Vice Commander Wind, do you know how Star Moon Kingdom's various powers are faring against the Faux Saint monsters? Feng asked after recollecting himself. What was done was done. The time he lost was already gone and there was no way he could get it back. Fortunately, Star Moon Kingdom had only partially fallen. With Zero Wing's status as Star Moon Kingdom's #1 guild and the support of Stone Forest City, Zero Wing shouldn't face too many problems. After all, aside from Zero Wing's main force members that had gone over to the Western continent, there were still Melancholic Smile Yulan, and the others to manage things in Star Moon Kingdom. As he currently couldn't make contact with the outside world, the only thing he could do was collect as much information as possible regarding Star Moon Kingdom. The situation isn't optimistic, Solid Wind replied. Originally, these Faux Saint monsters already had a huge impact on Star Moon Kingdom. However, for some reason the main force members of Star Moon Kingdom's #1 guild, Zero Wing, actually refused to show themselves despite such a major incident occurring. Fortunately, some of Zero Wing's partners operating in Stone Forest City came to help fight these Faux Saint monsters, allowing Zero Wing to stabilize the situation in Star Moon Kingdom, albeit just barely. However, due to Zero Wing's passivity, a power called Saint's Hand took the opportunity to rise up in Star Moon Kingdom. Not only did Saint's Hand rapidly establish itself in the many resource spots overrun by the Faux Saint monsters, but they also established plenty of guild towns. It even managed to occupy a fortress in the Orc Empire. To put it simply, Saint's Hand has created a large safe zone where players can safely develop. At the same time, Saint's Hand is also rapidly devouring the territories of Star Moon Kingdom's second and third-rate guilds, provoking wars all over the kingdom. Moreover, the various superpowers and even the Blackwater Guild seem to be terrified of Saint's Hand. Recently, Saint's Hand even captured one of the Star Alliance's guild cities. Saint's Hand's influence in Star Moon Kingdom now exceeds Zero Wing's. I'm afraid it won't be long before Saint's Hand takes action against Zero Wing. At that time the entire Star Moon Kingdom will be engulfed in the fires of war. After Solid Wind fell silent, everyone present could not help sighing dejectedly. They were all players of Star Moon Kingdom. They had been developing there ever since they entered God's domain. Despite the Faux Saint monsters threatening Star Moon Kingdom's continued existence, not only did the kingdom's various powers not band together to face this threat, but they had even started fighting each other with even greater ferocity. As things stood, how was Star Moon Kingdom supposed to fend off the Faux Saint monsters, which were growing increasingly stronger with each passing day? The current Faux Saint monsters were far stronger than those that first appeared in Star Moon Kingdom. Initially, the Faux Saint monsters were merely level 100 lords. Let alone tier 3 players, even a party of tier 2 experts could easily slay them. Now, however, the Faux Saint monsters had grown to the point where even the weakest among them was a great lord. Everyone estimated that it wouldn't be long before mythic-ranked Faux Saint monsters started appearing. At that point Star Moon Kingdom would surely be doomed. Saint's Hand? This is interesting. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Despite going through his memories of his past life, Feng could not recall any power named Saint's Hand. However, seeing as Saint's Hand had managed to rise up in Star Moon Kingdom so quickly after the Purple Thorns Kingdom's fall, create a safe zone, and even capture a fortress in the Orc Empire, it was obvious that the guild possessed an extraordinary foundation. Friend, we are escorting this merchant fleet to Silverwing Town. How about coming with us? Currently, Silverwing Town has a tier 4 personal guard and many powerful combat puppets. It can be considered one of the few safe areas in the Orc Empire, as well as the Orc Empire's trade hub. Our commander is quite influential in Silverwing Town. If you wish to learn some more information about the situation, you should have an easier time doing so there, the tier 3 shield warrior suggested as he looked at Feng. In that case I'll have to trouble you then, Feng said and thanked the shield warrior for the invitation. Currently he didn't even know where exactly he was. He also didn't know the way back to Starmoon Kingdom. It would naturally be great if he could return to Silverwing Town. When the shield warrior heard Feng agree to his suggestion, he breathed out a sigh of relief. He then asked curiously, "Right, how should we address you, friend?" Chapter 2655. Birth of a Mythic. Upon hearing the Tier 3 shield warrior's words, Solid Wind turned to Feng with an embarrassed expression. Previously she had been focused on fighting, so she had forgotten to ask for Feng's name. In fact, she had even forgotten to thank Feng for his help. Fortunately, the shield warrior Crazed Bull had taken the initiative to ask. Otherwise, their adventurer team would appear very ungrateful. "Black Flame," Feng replied calmly. "Black Flame." Crazed Bull laughed involuntarily when he heard Feng's name. "Friend, your name is too amazing. Most likely, nobody in Starmoon Kingdom would dare show disrespect to this name." The rest of the team nodded in agreement with Crazed Bull's words. At this point in time, there was nobody unaware of the name of Zero Wing's guild leader. Let alone the Star Alliance, a first-rate guild operating in Starmoon Kingdom. Even the various superpowers had to show respect to Zero Wing now. All the players in Starmoon Kingdom knew of Black Flame's existence. However, no matter how they looked at Feng's cloaked figure, he didn't match the legendary Black Flame they knew of. They also didn't think that the guild leader of Zero Wing would come to this godforsaken place that was infested with faux saint monsters. Alright, it's just a form of address. Since he doesn't want to reveal his name, there's no need for us to pry into the matter, Solid Wind whispered through the team chat when she saw her teammates poking fun at Feng. At Solid Wind's admonishment, everyone promptly nodded and dropped the topic. After all, it was all thanks to Feng that they survived. Since Feng wished to conceal his identity, they naturally wouldn't try to delve into the matter. "We still haven't thanked you for your help just now, Brother Black Flame. In the future, if you come across any trouble in the Orc Empire or Starmoon Kingdom, please feel free to seek us out. Our blood-packed adventurer team might not be comparable to large guilds, but we are more than capable of settling small problems," Solid Wind said in gratitude as she approached Feng. "That's right. We might not be some famous top adventurer team, but we are still one of the top 20 adventurer teams operating in the Orc Empire. If you come across some wandering dark players, so long as you mention the name Blood Pact, those dark players will generally show some respect and take a step back," Crazed Bull said confidently. "Alright," Feng said nodding. At the same time, a bitter smile formed beneath the hood of his cloak when he saw that Solid Wind and her team did not believe him. "Let's get back on the carriages and continue on our way. Once night arrives, not only will those faux saint monsters grow more active, but Saint's Hands members will also ambush the players operating around Silverwing Town. With the little manpower we have, we definitely won't be able to defend all the merchandise," Solid Wind said as she pointed at the nearby merchant fleet. Everyone then boarded the carriages of the merchant fleet, not daring to waste any more time in this place. "Vice Commander Wind, since the faux saint monsters are more active at night, aren't Saint's Hands members afraid of getting assaulted by them?" Feng asked curiously after getting onto the leading carriage. Since Saint's Heart was trying to expand its influence in Starmoon Kingdom, clashing with Zero Wing was inevitable. Hence, he wasn't surprised that Saint's Heart was targeting the players operating around Zero Wing's territories. However, the faux saint monster's strength was no trivial matter either. It would be extremely foolish for Saint's Hand to take action in Silverwing Town's vicinity during the faux saint monster's peak period. We found this situation very strange as well. However, it seems that Saint's Hand has developed a special tool. And when players wear this special tool, so long as they do not attack those faux saint monsters, then those faux saint monsters won't attack them either. With this tool, Saint's Heart's members can coordinate their movements with the faux saint monsters in targeting Silverwing Town. Recently their assaults have become stronger. By the looks of it, Saint's Hand wants to capture Silverwing Town as soon as possible, Solid Wind said. However, for independent players like ourselves, we really don't wish to see Silverwing Town fall. Thus far, the guild towns captured by Saint's Hand are open only to Saint's Hand's members. Meanwhile, Silverwing Town is the Orc Empire's current economic center. If Saint's Hand manages to capture Silverwing Town, then we won't have anywhere to go. Hence, Many adventurer teams and even some of Star Moon Kingdom's guilds are currently working together to assist Zero Wing in defending against Saint's Heart's assault and protecting the merchant fleets heading toward Silverwing town. Only, due to the Faux Saint monsters growing increasingly stronger, our side has recently started to fall into a disadvantage. I don't know how much longer we can hold out like this. Aside from Solid Wind, the other players present also hated Saint's hand with a vengeance. Currently, the various kingdoms and powers were already struggling to deal with the Faux Saint monsters, yet Saint's hand was actually exploiting the situation, making it increasingly difficult for independent players like themselves to survive. However, despite their hatred for Saint's hand, they were utterly powerless to do anything against the guild. In fact, even the various superpowers did not dare to oppose Saint's hand and could only watch from the sidelines. From the conversations with Solid Wind and the others, Faux gradually understood Star Moon Kingdom's current situation. Although Star Moon Kingdom had already lost close to half of its territory, not a single main city-ranked NPC city had fallen. Even so, the situation did not look too good for the kingdom. This was because the Faux Saint monsters were growing increasingly stronger, which in turn prompted a large number of players to emigrate from the kingdom. At this point, White River City, which originally had a player population exceeding 10 million, now had a population of less than 4 million. The other NPC cities in the kingdom were in an even worse state. Meanwhile, the drastic decrease in player population had also caused Star Moon Kingdom's economy to contract, forcing many powers to leave the kingdom in search of greener pastures. To make matters worse, the departure of Star Moon Kingdom's major powers opened up opportunities for the various dark powers to rise up. The kingdom's dark powers had already developed to a point where normal players might lose their lives as soon as they left the protection of an NPC town or city. Overall, the situation in Star Moon Kingdom could be summed up with a single word: chaos. Most importantly, with the Faux Saint monsters growing increasingly stronger, everyone could already foresee the day when Star Moon Kingdom's main city-ranked NPC cities fell. At that time, the entire kingdom would collapse, and only those that joined Saint's hand could avoid getting devoured by the Faux Saint monsters in the kingdom. As the merchant fleet continuously advanced, before anyone realized it, they had already arrived in a desert woodland close to Silverwing town. Currently, at least 20 merchant fleets could be seen advancing towards Silverwing town under the escort of players. From this, one could easily see how prosperous the current Silverwing town was. Moreover, aside from the escorting adventurer teams, there was also an army of 10,000 players, belonging to the various large guilds, patrolling the vicinity of Silverwing town. We're finally safe. Solid Wind breathed out a sigh of relief when she saw this guild army. The sky was already darkening. The Faux Saint monsters they had to face at this time were no laughing matter, not to mention the threat of Saint's Hand's experts. Their merchant fleet would definitely face annihilation if they came across an ambush. Today's patrol really is amazing. The Star Alliance's vice guild leader Purple Eye is actually leading it. With this, even if Saint's Hand's members attack together with the Faux Saint monsters, we have nothing to fear, Crazed Bull said, his eyes glowing with excitement as he gazed at the beautiful crimson-robed woman leading the patrol army. The other Blood Pact members nodded their heads in agreement with Crazed Bull when they saw Purple Eye. Nowadays, despite Star Moon Kingdom giving birth to plenty of new experts, those capable of making it to the God's Domain experts list still numbered very few. After all, players all over God's Domain were also continuously growing stronger. The difficulty of ranking within the God's Domain experts list was many times greater than before. Meanwhile, among Star Moon Kingdom's experts on the experts list, Purple Eye ranked within the top 300. According to rumors, she had obtained a powerful bloodline, and her combat power now rivaled that of monster-level experts. To top it all off, just recently Purple Eye had even succeeded in fully unlocking her mana body. At this point, everyone in Star Moon Kingdom was already guessing that Purple Eye had already surpassed Zero Wing's Aqua Rose in terms of strength and that she was catching up to Black Flame. With such an expert protecting them, how could they not feel assured? While Blood Pact's members were quietly discussing Purple Eye, a disturbance erupted in the distance. Shortly afterward, deafening roars came from the same direction. Run! Run quickly! The Faux Saint monsters have come. Upon hearing someone shout these words, everyone in the vicinity reflexively turned to look at the origin of the roars. What entered everyone's sight was a massive dust cloud rapidly approaching. Meanwhile, within the dust cloud, they could faintly make out the figures of 6-meter-tall faux saint monsters, easily numbering several thousand. Everyone quickly retreat to Silverwing town. Our patrol will hold the rear. Purple Eye shouted when she saw the army of faux saint monsters bearing down on them. The patrol army promptly shifted to a defensive formation. From how calmly the patrol army's members reacted even after seeing the approach of several thousand faux saint monsters, it was obvious that they were all experienced experts. However, when the faux saint monsters arrived within 500 yards, the expressions of the patrol army's members changed. Not good. There's a mythic-ranked faux saint monster. Among the faux saint monsters present, even the faux saint destroyers were only 7 meters tall. However, to everyone's surprise, a 12-meter-tall figure was running amidst the monster army. The intense pressure this 12-meter-tall faux saint monster exuded was so powerful that even level 112 Tier 2 experts felt stifled. The Grand Lord-ranked faux saint destroyers were already incredibly difficult to deal with for Tier 3 experts. In fact, even peak experts had died when fighting against a faux saint destroyer. Nobody dared imagine how powerful a faux saint monster would become after reaching the mythic rank. Not to mention, aside from the mythic-ranked faux saint monster, the monster army also had several hundred faux saint destroyers and several thousand faux saint saboteurs. How is this possible? How can a mythic-ranked faux saint monster appear so quickly? Solid Wind was stunned when she saw the gigantic faux saint monster. We're doomed. We're really doomed this time. Crazed Bull similarly fell into despair at this situation. When facing an army of Grand Lord-ranked faux saint destroyers, players like themselves could still band together to fend off the monsters. However, now that mythic-ranked faux saint monsters had started appearing in the faux saint armies, it was only a matter of time before Silverwing town perished. After all, even now, nobody had managed to kill a faux saint destroyer. Needless to say, killing the mythic-ranked faux saint Devourer would be even more impossible. Moreover, these faux saint monsters would only grow increasingly stronger as time passed. Players like themselves were helpless to stop these monsters. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. Before anyone could properly react to the appearance of a mythic-ranked faux saint monster, the faux saint army had already started clashing with the patrol army. Against a mythic-ranked faux saint Devourer, even the defense of Tier 3 MTs was no different from paper. Executing a horizontal swipe with its spear, the faux saint Devourer easily sent the Tier 3 MTs in its path flying, the MTs losing HP rapidly. Even when Purple Eye, a level 114 Tier 3 elementalist, used a Tier 3 curse against the faux saint destroyer, the mythic monster not only blocked the attack without any difficulty but even managed to turn the force of the attack to its advantage, propelling itself toward Purple Eye at lightning speed. If not for her quick reaction activating a life-saving skill in time, she would have been instantly killed. Brother Black Flame, let's hurry up and leave. The patrol army won't hold out for very long, Crazed Bull urged anxiously when he saw Faux jumping off the carriage. If even an expert of Purple Eye's caliber was at an absolute disadvantage, the Faux Saint army would eventually break through the patrol army's defensive line. Chapter 2656, Frightening Monster. Silverwing Town, Blue Rose Bar. As one of the few advanced bars found in Silverwing Town, not only was the Blue Rose Bar a place where experts exchanged information, but it was also a sacred place for the various well-known adventurer teams to celebrate their harvests. Hence, the Blue Rose Bar was basically crowded with players every day. At this moment, however, only a dozen or so people occupied the bar's third floor. Of the people there, even the lowest leveled was level 114 with the highest at level 115. These players also boasted excellent equipment, the weakest piece of equipment being level 110 Dark Gold rank. As for level 100 plus epic equipment that could make even peak experts drool, every one of these players had at least 2 pieces, with some of them sporting up to 4. However, compared to the levels and equipment of these people, their identity was what was truly astonishing. These players were none other than the peak experts of Crimson Emperor, a guild that was known by almost everyone in the surrounding kingdoms and empires. Meanwhile, seated at the head of this group was Illusory Words, one of Crimson Emperor's vice guild leaders. Sure enough, just like our spies in Saint's Hand reported, the mythic-ranked Faux Saint Devourer that recently spawned is planning to attack Silverwing Town, A level 114 man with a fierce look said as he looked at the image on the magic mirror set up in the middle of the table. Sighing, the man continued, "It won't be long before more Faux Saint Devourers appear. With this, Silverwing town will fall within a few days. At that time, it will be useless even if Zero Wing's main force members show up." Upon hearing the fierce man's words, the other Crimson Emperor members fell silent. The Grand Lord-ranked Faux Saint Destroyers were already plenty strong. Now even a Mythic-ranked Faux Saint Devourer had appeared. The strength and combat standards the Faux Saint Devourer had displayed thus far were enough to give even peak experts like themselves goosebumps. Most likely, even if their group here worked together to attack it, they would all still die. Meanwhile, once the numbers of these Faux Saint Devourers grew to around 20 or 30, they might be capable of destroying even guild cities. What is the guild leader's response to this matter? Illusory words asked the fierce man. When she saw the Faux Saint Devourer's unstoppable rampage through the magic mirror, she could not help frowning either. The guild leader has ordered a complete withdrawal. He says that there's no need for us to accompany Zero Wing in its fight to the death against these Faux Saint monsters, the fierce man replied. A complete withdrawal? Illusory Words was a little surprised by the answer she received. Previously, their guild leader had personally dispatched Crimson Emperor's experts to help defend Silverwing Town. This indicated that he strongly supported Crimson Emperor's partnership with Zero Wing. Now, however, before Crimson Emperor's experts had even started fighting, he was actually ordering a retreat. Illusory Words found this situation unbelievable. That's right, a complete withdrawal. The current God's domain is no longer the same as before. We have a ton of matters to deal with just in the Dark Knight Empire alone. This is especially true now that Starlink's development is accelerating. At this point, Starlink already has designs on a few of our guild towns. Moreover, the situation here is obviously hopeless, so it is naturally much better if we post our available combat power to defensible locations. Unyielding Soul should be doing likewise, the fierce man explained. Do we have any new information on Zero Wing's guild leader and main force? Illusory Words asked. There's still nothing even now. I heard that Zero Wing's upper echelons have tried contacting Black Flame and the others, but their virtual gaming cabins remain under lockdown. If they sever the power to the gaming cabins, there's a very high chance that Black Flame and the others will enter a deep coma. Hence all they can do is wait, the fierce man said, shaking his head. However, with the present situation, there's no chance of Zero Wing making a comeback. Setting aside the threat of Starlink and the Dark World, Zero Wing will have difficulty defending its headquarters in Starmoon Kingdom from the Faux Saint monsters. Nothing will change even if Black Flame and the others return. The difference in combat power is simply too large. Moreover, there's also Saint's Hand, which is eyeing Zero Wing's position in Starmoon Kingdom. Saint's Hand's origin is extremely mysterious and extraordinary. Even Blackwater's mighty Xuanwu Chisa seems afraid of it. Otherwise, with her personality, she definitely wouldn't make any concessions in the Orc Empire. I understand. However, at the rate the Faux Saint Devourers are spawning, so long as we defend together, we should be able to hold out for another 2 weeks or so. Retreating so soon is really... Although Illusory Words understood what the fierce man was trying to say, she still could not bring herself to give up just like that. 2 weeks. The fierce man revealed a bitter smile at Illusory Words' statement. If we really could hold on for another 2 weeks, the guild leader wouldn't have called for a retreat right away. What do you mean? Illusory Words asked curiously. While Tier 4 combatants were indeed extremely powerful and especially useful when attacking fortified locations, with Silverwing Town's defenses and the experts like themselves present, it would take at least 20 or 30 Faux Saint Devourers to conquer Silverwing Town. According to the information we collected from Saint's Hand, when Faux Saint monsters reach the Mythic rank, not only do their basic attributes and combat power undergo a qualitative transformation, but so does their intellect as well, the fierce man said, fear darkening his eyes as he looked at the Faux Saint Devourer displayed on the magic mirror. Isn't it normal for them to gain a boost to their intellect? Illusory Words didn't get the fierce man's point. It wouldn't be a problem if it were a normal improvement in intellect. However, according to Saint's Hand's information, these Faux Saint monsters gain the ability to learn once they reach the Mythic rank. In just a few minutes they can learn the combat techniques players use. And the more experts they fight, the more quickly they improve. They are monsters in the truest sense. The fierce man explained. How is this possible? Doesn't this mean that, aside from NPCs, nobody will be able to suppress those faux saint devourers? Illusory Words could not help feeling that the fierce man was being too alarmist when she heard his words. Learning a combat technique was easier said than done. Even with the guidance of a complete legacy crystal, peak experts would need dozens of hours to learn a combat technique. Without any guidance, they wouldn't be able to learn a combat technique even given a month or two. Hence, how could a monster that, at most, possessed intellect rivaling that of ordinary players, learn a combat technique in just a few minutes? I didn't believe this information either, the fierce man said as he chuckled bitterly. He then sent a video recording to Illusory Words and continued, "Take a look at it yourself." When Illusory Words played the video recording, it showed a Tier 3 Void Realm expert fighting a Mythic-ranked Faux Saint Devourer. At the start of the fight, the Void Realm expert was merely at a disadvantage in terms of basic attributes. With his superior combat standards, he should be able to survive against the Devourer for quite some time. However, after the Void Realm expert cycled through a few combat techniques a few times, the Faux Saint Devourer seemingly got bored of the expert's antics and executed a basic footwork to instantly kill the said expert. And shortly afterward, the fallen expert's corpse transformed into a Faux Saint monster. How is this possible? Goosebumps rose all over Illusory Words' body when she saw the peak expert getting killed. Her reaction was because this peak expert was someone she recognized. He was none other than 100 Arms, the commander of the adventurer team Crimson Wolves, a top adventurer team based in the Black Dragon Empire. 100 Arms was an expert who was only half a step away from reaching the domain realm. However, despite 100 Arms having such high combat standards, the Faux Saint Devourer had actually instant-killed him. Moreover, the monster had even used 100 Arms' prided footwork, doppelganger steps, to do so. That's right. That Faux Saint Devourer learned doppelganger steps in only a minute. Moreover, the Devourer was extremely cunning while fighting 100 Arms. It didn't use its full strength at the start of the fight. Instead, it held back and squeezed out all of 100 Arms' potential, forcing 100 Arms to use every move he had. Only after seeing that 100 Arms had nothing left to offer did the Devourer kill him. The situation is similar to Purple Eye's right now, the fierce man said, breathing out a deep sigh as he watched Purple Eye clash with the Faux Saint Devourer through the magic mirror. No wonder the guild leader wants us to retreat immediately. Who could possibly be a match for such a monster? Illusory Words muttered, still in shock over the Faux Saint Devourer's intellect. With such strength and intellect, the Faux Saint Devourer simply wasn't an existence that players could handle. Only NPCs could kill such a monster. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Just as Illusory Words was about to command Crimson Emperor's members to withdraw from Silverwing Town, the movement pattern of the Faux Saint Devourer fighting Purple Eye suddenly changed. In the blink of an eye, it appeared behind the Elementalist and sent over 20 spear images stabbing at her. The move the Faux Saint Devourer had executed was one that Illusory Words was familiar with. It was another one of 100 Arms' trademark moves, the advanced combat technique Fallen Leaves. Upon seeing this move being executed, Illusory Words could not help a sigh. When 100 Arms executed this move, even Domain Realm experts couldn't stop it completely. Now that the Faux Saint Devourer had perfectly replicated the move, needless to say, a Flowing Water Realm expert like Purple Eye stood no chance against it. However, just as Illusory Words was about to turn her gaze away from the magic mirror, a flash appeared in the mirror. In the next moment, a pitch-black wall appeared between Purple Eye and the 20-plus spear images, the spear images vanishing without a trace when they came into contact with the pitch-black wall. Chapter 2657, Clashing with the Faux Saint Devourer. It got blocked. How is that possible? That's an advanced combat technique used by a mythic monster. Crimson Emperor's members seated in the Blue Rose Bar's third floor rubbed their eyes in shock when they saw the pitch-black wall displayed on the magic mirror. For a moment they all thought they were hallucinating. In terms of basic attributes, the Faux Saint Devourer was above average among mythic monsters of the same level. Combined with 100 Arms' Fallen Leaves technique, the power of the Devourer's attack should be capable of sending even mythic monsters flying. Nevertheless, against the pitch-black wall that suddenly appeared, the attack was nothing. The players standing on the battlefield were similarly stunned by this scene. What's going on? Is that pitch-black wall some kind of defensive spell? Isn't it a little too amazing? Everyone was surprised and confused by the pitch-black wall that had suddenly appeared on the battlefield. Not only did this pitch-black wall block the Faux Saint Devourer's attack, but it had even split the entire battlefield in half, forcing the majority of the monster army to halt their charge. Now the Faux Saint monsters could only stand still and quietly look at the pitch-black wall before them. This is a spatial tear. Illusory Words exclaimed when she saw the pitch-black wall fading out of existence. A spatial tear? How is that possible? Even a very powerful attack would, at most, cause a thin tear stretching over a dozen yards. This wall is over 100 yards long and over 50 yards tall. Who could possibly have such strength? The fierce man refuted, shaking his head in denial. He felt that Illusory Words' conjecture was ridiculous. Everyone in the bar's third floor was familiar with spatial tears. After all, they would always come across spatial tears when clashing with Tier 4 mythic monsters. A spatial tear was the byproduct of an attack carrying too much power for the surrounding space to handle. The surrounding space would destabilize and shatter like broken glass, which was why the shape of spatial tears was generally irregular. However, the pitch-black wall displayed on the magic mirror was incredibly stable. There were no cracks in it at all. It looked like a steel wall that had just fallen out of the sky, incredibly smooth and heavy. I guess you're right. Even that person wouldn't be capable of such a feat, Illusory Words said, laughing despite herself. After giving the matter some thought, she agreed with the fierce man. Regardless who saved Purple Eye, the fierce man wondered as he carefully tracked the pitch-black wall back to its origin. Setting aside the wall's defensive capabilities, just the fact that this person saw through the Faux Saint Devourer's movements is already plenty amazing. I doubt there are more than a handful of people in the entire Silverwing town who would be a match for this person. Did an old monster belonging to one of Zero Wing's partners take action? The fierce man's gaze landed on a cloaked man wielding a pitch-black long sword, the origin of the remarkable wall. Although he couldn't see any information about this cloaked man, his gut told him that this cloaked man possessed astonishing strength, definitely at the domain realm. Before the pitch-black wall disappeared completely, the cloaked man vanished from his original location and arrived before the Faux Saint Devourer. He then stopped another spear attack from the Devourer, allowing Purple Eye to put some distance between herself and the mythic monster. Crap. Who is that guy? He actually managed to block that Faux Saint Devourer's attack. Crazed Bull exclaimed, his eyes nearly falling out of their sockets when he saw Feng successfully rescuing Purple Eye. At this moment, aside from Crazed Bull, even Solid Wind could not help goggling in shock, her mind freezing in disbelief. Previously, she already found Feng's ability to pin down 2 Faux Saint destroyers all by himself astounding. Now, the man had even single-handedly pinned down the mythic-ranked Faux Saint Devourer, which even an expert of Purple Eye's caliber was no match for. Amazing! He's actually keeping up with that Devourer's speed. With this, he should have no problems handling the Devourer, Illusory Words said, her eyes glowing with excitement when she saw the cloaked man deflecting every one of the Faux Saint Devourer's attacks. If Silverwing Town has his protection, we should be able to sustain the town for some time and foil Saint's Hand's plan to solicit help from the neighboring kingdom's powers. That way, Saint's Hand's development speed will slow down, and Zero Wing will have some breathing room. If Zero Wing can continue holding out in Starmoon Kingdom, we'll have an easier time resisting Starlink in the Dark Knight Empire as well. This will only delay the inevitable. That Faux Saint Devourer will grow stronger as more time passes. Its growth speed is also no laughing matter. Not to mention, Saint's Hand has already informed the various superpowers that anyone that helps Zero Wing will become Saint's Hand's enemy, the fierce man said, shaking his head. Saint's Hand has done considerable research into the Faux Saint monsters. In the future, we'll definitely need Saint's Hand's help to deal with the threat of the Faux Saint monsters. This is also why the guild leader is having us withdraw completely. The appearance of that mysterious expert won't change anything. In fact, Saint's Hand will probably locate the power behind that mysterious expert and give that power a warning. Aside from Crimson Emperor's members, the members of various superpowers hidden in Silverwing Town also viewed this situation indifferently. Zero Wing sure is lucky. It actually managed to get the help of an old monster. I bet that old monster has yet to receive the news. Otherwise, why would he move to help Zero Wing? Although they did not know which superpower's old monster was helping Zero Wing right now, They knew that this would be the only time this old monster would do so. Afterward, Saint's Hand would definitely warn the superpower backing this old monster. Once that happened, said superpower would most likely stop assisting Zero Wing in defending the town against the Faux Saint monsters. Not only was the current era of God's domain filled with turmoil, but it was also the era of the Faux Saint monsters. Faux Saint monsters were a huge headache even for super guilds. Moreover, stopping the spread of these Faux Saint monsters was also impossible. In the future, any guild that wished to develop safely in God's domain, be it a small guild or a super guild, would have to partner or trade with Saint's Hand. After all, up to now, no other power had managed to develop a tool that could prevent the Faux Saint monsters from attacking players. In fact, Saint's Hand even had the means to prevent the Faux Saint monsters from attacking an entire area. Now that Saint's Hand was determined to destroy Zero Wing, even the Secret Pavilion would be able to stop it, just like how the Secret Pavilion had failed to stop Saint's Hand from capturing one of the Star Alliance's guild cities. Meanwhile, as time passed, due to reinforcements continuously pouring out of Silverwing town, the patrol army eventually gained the upper hand over the Faux Saint army. In fact, over 1,000 Faux Saint saboteurs had fallen in battle already, which made the Faux Saint Devourer anxious. In the next moment, the Faux Saint Devourer let loose a deafening roar that echoed throughout the battlefield. Immediately afterward, the Faux Saint army scattered and fled. As for the Faux Saint Devourer itself, it too turned around and ran off. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Sure enough, it is going to escape. Silverwing town might have survived this time, but let's see how it's going to stop the next attack. The superpowers hidden within Silverwing town were not at all surprised when they saw the Faux Saint army retreating. After all, with the Faux Saint Devourer thoroughly suppressed, it was only a matter of time before the Faux Saint army suffered annihilation. However, what made the Faux Saint monsters truly formidable was their ability to grow stronger with each battle they experienced. Even though Silverwing town had successfully fended off today's attack, it wouldn't necessarily be able to repeat the feat, escape. Feng sneered when he saw the Faux Saint Devourer fleeing. Do you think you can escape? Following which he took out the Ring of Gospel from his bag and activated Miniature World. Chapter 2658. Power of Tier 4 Concentration. When Feng activated Miniature World, the sky above the desert woodland darkened as if night had fallen. Immediately, everyone on the battlefield felt their perception of their surroundings vanish. It was as if they had been plunked into a pitch-black void with nothing in it. Moreover, aside from the players, even the fleeing Faux Saint monsters came to a halt and aimlessly turned their heads left and right, their eyes brimming with fear and confusion. Shortly afterward, a colorful brilliance descended from the sky, the lights giving off a sacred and majestic feeling. Spectators at a distance would see a gigantic rainbow barrier enveloping the entire desert woodland outside Silverwing town. This rainbow barrier thoroughly isolated the woodland from the outside world, making the woodland look like a mirage. Meanwhile, beneath this colorful brilliance, the Faux Saint monsters started wailing in agony, one after another, their screams echoing throughout the woodland. At the same time, the intense aura they radiated waned rapidly, and even their basic attributes and reaction speed weakened to an unbelievable degree. It was as if these Faux Saint monsters that everyone originally feared had become common monsters. Seeing this scene, everyone on the battlefield was stunned. Isn't this a little too strong? He actually debuffed several thousand Faux Saint monsters to such an extent in an instant. Who is this guy? The various adventurer teams escorting merchant fleets and the patrol army fending off the Faux Saint monsters stared at Feng in astonishment. They had seen many instances of magic arrays suppressing monsters before, but this was the first time they had seen a magic array produce such a huge commotion and effect. Any random Faux Saint saboteur was more than enough to give Tier 3 experts a headache. What more the Faux Saint destroyers? Now, however, several hundred Faux Saint destroyers had been suppressed until they were just slightly stronger than ordinary Great Lords. Even ordinary Tier 3 experts could handle these Grand Lords. As for the almighty Faux Saint Devourer, it was no different from an ordinary mythic monster. In its present state, even Tier 3 peak experts could resist it for a certain period. Master magic arrays were unlikely to be able to produce such results. Moreover, the magic array Feng used spanned the entire desert woodland. At this moment, Feng himself was very surprised by the effects of Miniature World. He never thought that after his concentration had reached the Tier 4 standard, aside from being able to exhibit the power of an advanced combat technique with his every movement, his control over magic arrays would also improve to such a frightening degree. Currently, miniature world suppression effects could rival those of advanced master magic arrays. Despite his surprise, Feng did not pause. After activating miniature world, he promptly charged at the Faux Saint Devourer. Under the suppression of miniature world, the Faux Saint Devourer's speed had decreased considerably. In just 2 seconds, Feng intercepted the mythic monster and sent the abyssal blade cutting at it. Immediately, a crescent arc appeared and cut through the Faux Saint Devourer's shoulder. Failing to react to the attack in time, the Devourer got sent flying and crashed into a large tree several yards away, a damage exceeding -600,000 appearing above its head. The disparity in combat power was clear for all to see. What is that magic array? The Faux Saint Devourer actually doesn't even have the strength to fight back? The various superpowers spectating the fight from Silverwing Town gaped in shock when they saw the Faux Saint Devourer at a complete disadvantage. In fact, the Devourer's reaction speed couldn't even keep up with the swordsman's movements. Although they could tell through their magic mirrors that the Faux Saint Devourer's basic attributes had decreased by a significant margin, the Devourer should be at the standard of ordinary mythic monsters. Given its knowledge of combat techniques, its overall combat power should still be on par with that of domain realm experts. After all, the basic attributes of a Tier 4 monster was no trivial matter. However, let alone putting up a fight, the Faux Saint Devourer couldn't even defend itself against Feng's attacks, its HP continuously decreasing. It simply couldn't keep up with Feng's movements. After seeing this, everyone could already imagine what outcome awaited the Faux Saint Devourer. Death. While it might be impossible for Feng to kill the Faux Saint Devourer by himself, as the mythic monster had 1.6 billion HP, so long as a dozen or so Tier 3 experts joined him in assaulting it, the Devourer would eventually fall. Until this day, let alone killing a mythic-ranked Faux Saint Devourer, the various superpowers hadn't even managed to kill a Grand Lord-ranked Faux Saint Destroyer before. Now, however, Feng accomplished this miracle just by using a magic array. This was simply unbelievable. Following which, time passed quickly. Less than 10 minutes after Feng activated Miniature World, all the Faux Saint saboteurs on the battlefield had already fallen to the patrol army, while the Faux Saint Destroyer's HPs were down by half. As for the Faux Saint Devourer, with Feng, Purple Eye and several dozen other Tier 3 experts attacking it, its HP had fallen below the 70% threshold already. The players present could not help growing excited at this scene. This was especially true for the members of the various adventurer teams. After all, the Faux Saint monster's undefeated streak had finally ended. Previously, the various powers and players had been afraid of the Faux Saint monsters because the Grand Lord-ranked Faux Saint Destroyers were basically impossible to kill, not to mention the Mythic-ranked Faux Saint Devourer. However, now that killing these Grand Lord and Mythic-ranked Faux Saint monsters was no longer a problem, not only was there hope of Star Moon Kingdom's survival, but reclaiming some of the kingdom's lost land might even be possible. Players like themselves would then be able to continue developing in the Orc Empire and Star Moon Kingdom like before. I don't know who that person is, but after this battle, the situation in the Orc Empire and Star Moon Kingdom is most likely going to change, illusory words said, the corners of her lips curling up slightly as she watched Feng suppressing the Faux Saint Devourer on the magic mirror. Previously, the undefeatable Faux Saint monsters were the main reason why the various major powers and superpowers feared Saint's hand. Now, although they had succeeded in killing only a very small portion of the Faux Saint monsters plaguing Star Moon Kingdom, so long as news of this success spread, Saint's hand would no longer be able to act in an overbearing manner as it did before. However, just when the various superpowers hidden within Silverwing Town thought that the Faux Saint army was going to suffer annihilation, several dozen lightning spears descended from the sky, shooting at Feng and the others, who were assaulting the Faux Saint Devourer. The speed and power of the lightning spears were so great that more than 20 Tier 3 experts were instantly vaporized. Along with the descent of the lightning spears, 2 magic barriers suddenly appeared around the injured Faux Saint Devourer, protecting it from further harm. The Tier 3 Curse Purple Eye used failed to break through them. Before anyone could react to this turn of events, over 100 figures emerged rapidly from the surrounding forest and interposed themselves between the Faux Saint Devourer and Feng's group. Surprisingly, Every one of these new arrivals radiated an aura rivaling that of grand lords of the same level. Who are you people? What are you trying to do? After Purple Eye saw her companions killed and the Faux Saint Devourer protected by a twofold magic array, an indescribable rage welled up within her as she glared at the 100-plus black-clad Tier 3 experts that had suddenly appeared. If not for these new arrivals exuding auras rivaling that of Grand Lords, she would have attacked them already. However, reason told her she absolutely mustn't do so. After all, so long as she took action, both she and her several dozen remaining teammates would die swiftly. At this time, a tall and bald man with golden eyes walked out of the group. Looking at Purple Eye, the bald man smiled and said, "Commander Purple, long time no see. Do you still recognize me?" Chapter 2659, Black Flame? When everyone heard this calm voice, they looked at its origin reflexively. Meanwhile, the person who said these words was none other than the cloaked man who had suppressed the Faux Saint Devourer and single-handedly turned the tides of this battle. Is he really opposing Saint's hand? The various superpowers members spectating from Silverwing Town were surprised by this development. They never thought that the swordsman would actually dare provoke Saint's Heart's members. Moreover, he had even spoken those provocative words to Thousand Eyes, the commander of one of Saint Han's 3 trump card legions. The swordsman was simply too bold. At this moment, even Illusory Words and the other Crimson Emperor members seated inside the Blue Rose Bar were astonished by this situation. Although Saint's Heart's members numbered only a little over 100, which was nothing compared to Silverwing Town's patrol army, these Saint's Heart members all possessed extraordinary strength. In fact, Thousand Eyes had relied on these 100-plus players to attack and capture the Star Alliance's heavily defended guild residents. They had even killed more than 600 of the Secret Pavilion's Tier 3 experts that were dispatched to help the Star Alliance. At Silverwing Town, one could say that unless Zero Wing's main force members took action, nobody could stop Thousand Eyes' group. But why does this scene feel familiar? When Illusory Words saw the standoff on the magic mirror, she had a sense of déjà vu. At the desert woodland, Purple Eye could not help growing somewhat anxious when she saw Feng challenging Thousand Eyes. Others might not know how powerful Thousand Eyes and his team were, but she did. After all, she had witnessed him in action before. It might be fine if they were within 300 or 400 yards of Silverwing Town, since Silverwing Town's Tier 4 personal guard could take action at that range. As strong as they were, even Thousand Eyes and his team would not dare mess around with a Tier 4 NPC. However, not only were they quite some distance from Silverwing Town, but the majority of the patrol army were currently scattered all over the battlefield. With only a little more than 30 Tier 3 experts on Purple Eye's side, even if Feng's combat power could suppress the Faux Saint Devourer, her people still wouldn't be a match for Thousand Eyes' team. The members of Thousand Eyes' team simply couldn't be considered human. They were more like a group of humanoid beasts. Otherwise, they wouldn't have dared attack the Star Alliance's guild residents, which had been guarded by several hundred Tier 3 personal guards and over 10,000 experts, with just 100-plus players. Their inhuman strength was also the reason why Thousand Eyes and his team dared take action so close to Silverwing Town. As Purple Eye was growing nervous over this matter, Thousand Eyes turned to Feng. "I don't know who you are, but I advise you not to look for trouble. Your strength and abilities are indeed amazing. I'm sure many superpowers will fear you. However, all of those things are nothing to Saint's hand," Thousand Eyes said coldly. "Since you wish to destroy the current balance of God's domain, I'll teach you a small portion of the consequences of doing so." As soon as Thousand Eyes finished speaking, 5 figures appeared from behind him, simultaneously activating a Tier 3 combination skill, Purgatory Storm. Each of these 5 people immediately split into 6 copies of themselves and surrounded Feng. The 30 doppelgangers then launched a synchronized strike at Feng, every one of their attacks carrying power at the Tier 4 standard. With 30 attacks coming from all directions, let alone dodging, Feng wouldn't even be able to defend himself completely. This scene surprised the various superpowers spectating experts. Saint's Hand actually has a 5-man Tier 3 combination skill? Illusory Words frowned when she saw the 5 players attacking Feng. Tier 3 skills and spells were originally plenty rare already. Even the superpowers Tier 3 experts hardly had any Tier 3 skills or spells, let alone Tier 3 combination skills, which even the superpowers dreamed of obtaining. Even the weakest Tier 3 combination skill allowed players to exhibit power at the Tier 4 standard. Stronger Tier 3 combination skills could even repulse mythic monsters. Tier 3 combination skills served as a trump card against mythic bosses. However, until now there had been no news of any superpower obtaining a Tier 3 combination skill for 5 players. Even the strongest one required only 3 players to use. Against a 5-man Tier 3 combination skill, even the Faux Saint Devourer would not emerge unscathed. A 5-man Tier 3 combination skill. Sure enough, Xianxia's foundations truly are extraordinary. That guy must be stupefied right about now. When the various superpowers spectating members saw Faux surrounded, some of them laughed in ridicule while some sighed in disappointment. Although the swordsman indeed possessed astonishing strength, just like Thousand Eyes had said, it was nothing in front of Saint's hand. The 30 attacks which tore space, struck at Faux simultaneously, their frightening power making even Purple Eye, who stood over 30 yards away, feel stifled. Just as the 30 devastating attacks were about to devour Faux, however, he raised the abyssal blade overhead with both hands before swinging the magic weapon at the attacks. First sword Light Shadow. The phantom of a gigantic greatsword suddenly appeared in the air. However, compared to the previous times Faux executed Light Shadow, the phantom greatsword felt much more solid this time. Moreover, just its manifestation made the surrounding space heavy. Even the attacks approaching Faux slowed down considerably. At this moment, it was as if only this phantom greatsword was moving while everything else remained static. Boom. The 30 attacks capable of repulsing even the Faux Saint Devourer shattered instantly into countless particles of light, and the surrounding space crumbled from the terrifying force of the impact. Immediately afterward, 5 figures went flying out of the shattered space like cannonballs and crashed into the large trees over 30 yards away. Despite the trunks of the large trees having a 4-meter diameter, the 5 figures came to a stop only after ramming through several of these forest giants. And when these figures eventually landed back on the ground, their HP bars depleted rapidly and stabilized only after hitting the 30% mark. Upon seeing the 5 heavily injured Saint's Hand members, Purple Eye gaped in shock. With just one move, Faux not only shattered the 5-man Tier 3 combination skill but even heavily injured the 5 Saint's Hand members. The ease with which he neutralized the attack made it seem as if the 5 Saint's Hand members were not peak experts boasting basic attributes rivaling that of Grand Lords, but merely ordinary players that one could find anywhere. Who are you? When Thousand Eyes saw that Faux had survived the clash unscathed, the confidence in his eyes disappeared, replaced by surprise and confusion. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Thousand Eyes knew full well how powerful the Purgatory Storm his 5 subordinates executed was. This combination skill could block even the attack of a superior mythic. Now, however, Faux had actually shattered the combination skill and heavily injured his 5 subordinates with just one move. This was simply inconceivable. At this moment, let alone Thousand Eyes, everyone else watching the fight wanted to know Feng's identity. Who am I? Turning his gaze to Thousand Eyes, Feng retorted calmly, "You have the gall to take action in Silverwing Town's vicinity, yet you're asking who I am? Don't you think this question of yours is idiotic?" Upon hearing Feng's words, silence suddenly befell the various superpowers spectating members as they all stared at Feng's cloaked figure in disbelief. Black Flame. Chapter 2660, Legendary name. When Feng pushed back the hood of his black cloak, a deathly silence filled his surroundings. If not for the mantle of his cloak swaying with the breeze, one would think that time had stopped. He's actually the real Black Flame? Crazed Bull's eyes nearly fell out of their sockets as he goggled at Feng, his body shuddering involuntarily at this discovery. Black Flame. This was a name that every superpower on the continent knew. Black Flame was an existence that had pulled off numerous miracles in battle, one that even the superpowers had great difficulty dealing with. In the hearts of independent players he was akin to a living legend. Although Black Flame had disappeared from the eastern continent for some time now, just his prestige alone had allowed Zero Wing to continue rapidly developing on the eastern continent unharassed. Even an overbearing superpower like Saint's Hand did not dare mess around with Zero Wing and only quietly watched as the Faux Saint monsters chipped away at Zero Wing's forces. Saint's Hand did not dare directly target any of Zero Wing's guild towns or cities. Moreover, because of Black Flame's name, no superpower aside from a few like Starlink dared to hinder Zero Wing economically. He's back. He's finally back. Purple Eye could not help her excitement when she saw Shifeng's face. At the same time, though, an indescribable bitterness also filled her heart. Although the gap between the Star Alliance and Zero Wing had been widening all this time, Purple Eye had never given up on improving herself. She still hoped to surpass Aqua Rose and Gentle Snow one day and develop the Star Alliance into a superpower as well. However, against Saint's hand, her power had proven utterly insignificant. In the end, she could only watch as the Star Alliance's main headquarters in Star Moon Kingdom fell. In fact, she couldn't even adequately stop the Faux Saint monster's ambushes. Meanwhile, after a moment of silence, the various superpowers spectating members as well as Saint's Hand's members burst into laughter. Black Flame? Zero Wing's guild leader? So what if he returns now? He's been gone from the Eastern continent for so long. Does he really think the continent is the same as before? They were indeed very surprised by Shifeng's appearance. However, that was it, nothing more. After all, Shifeng had disappeared from the Eastern continent for far too long. He simply didn't know the situation the Eastern continent was currently in. So you're Zero Wing's guild leader, Black Flame. No wonder you could shatter that 5-man combination skill, Thousand Eyes said, applauding as he looked at Shifeng. In the next moment, though, he sneered, but so what if you've returned? Now that the Faux Saint army has already given birth to a mythic-ranked Faux Saint Devourer, many more of its kind will be appearing in the future. Nobody can stop the Faux Saint army now. Do you think you can change things just because you've returned? He was familiar with the name of Black Flame. This was a monster that his guild leader had warned him to be careful of. If it were a few days ago, he would indeed be terrified of Shifeng. Now, however, let alone fearing Shifeng, he didn't even consider the swordsman a threat. Boss, why are we wasting words with him? Since he is Black Flame, we should let this old bastard know that he is already obsolete. This is no longer his era, urged Irontooth, formerly the chief shield warrior of the Purple Thorns Kingdom's #1 guild, Sin Realm, with a playful smirk on his face. He had always wanted to destroy the guild known as Zero Wing. Unfortunately, back then Sin Realm was no match for Zero Wing at all. Now that he had joined Saint's Hand, however, he understood that Zero Wing wasn't a threat at all. Instead, it was merely a small stepping stone toward Saint's Hand's domination of the entire Eastern continent. I guess you're right. Thousand Eyes nodded in response to Irontooth's words. He then looked at Shifeng and said calmly, since you are Zero Wing's guild leader, then I'll make an exception today and show you Saint's Hand's true power. After saying so, Thousand Eyes glanced at Irontooth, who stood beside him. At this hint, Irontooth excitedly approached the Faux Saint Devourer, which was behind a twofold magic array. What is he trying to do? The excited look on Irontooth's face gave Purple Eye an inkling that something was amiss. It's nothing much. He's just going to show you people what the power of the new era is like. Thousand Eyes said, a smirk appearing on his face as he looked at Purple Eye. As Thousand Eyes said that, Irontooth took out a silvery white crystal from his bag and started chanting an incantation. Suddenly, the Faux Saint Devourer let loose a roar before its body burst into countless particles of silvery white light. These particles then merged with Irontooth's body. In the next moment, Irontooth transformed into a 6-meter-tall giant clad in silver armor. The aura he radiated much stronger than even that of the Faux Saint Devourer. How is this possible? Everyone present was stunned by this scene. They never imagined that players could obtain the strength of Faux Saint monsters. Moreover, it was obvious from the eyes of the armored giant that it was Irontooth. Only Irontooth was currently much stronger than even the Faux Saint Devourer. Previously, although the Faux Saint Devourer possessed an incredible learning ability, its combat standard wasn't very high. It wasn't capable of exhibiting its full strength. However, now that Irontooth had gained control of this strength, the combat power he could exhibit would far exceed that of the Faux Saint Devourer. Amazing. Truly amazing. So this is the strength of a mythic-ranked Faux Saint monster? Irontooth was ecstatic when he sensed the power he currently wielded. At this moment, the other Saint's Hand members present could not help envying Irontooth. In front of such strength, players were nothing. If they could have such strength as well, they could single-handedly annihilate an entire army of players. They wouldn't even have to fear Tier 4 NPCs. Meanwhile, the various superpowers spectating members gaped in shock at the transformed Iron Tooth. They hadn't suspected that Saint's hand had kept such a powerful trump card hidden all this time. This is bad. Although Iron Tooth is only in the flowing water realm with the Faux Saint Devourer's strength, let alone Black Flame, even Silverwing Town's Tier 4 personal guard might not be a match for him. Illusory Words' complexion darkened as she took in the armored giant displayed on the magic mirror. Originally, Shifeng's appearance should have been a joyous matter. With the combat power he possessed, he would be of great help in the current situation. However, Illusory Words had never imagined that Saint's hand would have such a trump card. The strength Iron Tooth now wielded simply wasn't something current players could hope to go up against. And if Faux got killed at this point, his death would deal an unprecedented blow to both Zero Wing and Starmoon Kingdom. Meanwhile, after Iron Tooth experienced his newfound strength for a short moment, he turned around and stepped forward, instantly appearing before Faux. He was so fast that even Purple Eye failed to react to his movements in time. Black Flame, weren't you very powerful? Weren't you Starmoon Kingdom's legendary figure? Weren't you thinking of stopping Saint's hand? I wonder how you feel about the situation now, Iron Tooth jeered as he looked down at Faux. Upon seeing Iron Tooth suddenly appear before Faux, the expressions of the patrol army's members turned indescribably grim. Even Purple Eye could not help panicking. Iron Tooth was simply too fast. By the time she sensed Iron Tooth moving, the latter had already appeared before Faux. She simply did not dare imagine what would happen when Iron Tooth actually took action. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. However, despite Iron Tooth appearing before him without any warning, Shifeng's expression remained ineffably calm. This move of yours is indeed amazing, Shifeng said as he shot a glance at Thousand Eyes. However, do you think you're the only ones that can transform into a monster? What do you mean? Thousand Eyes had a vague feeling that something was wrong when he saw how calm Shifeng was. However, before Thousand Eyes could say anything more, Shifeng unsheathed the abyssal blade and chanted an incantation. Black Dragon's Soul. Chapter 2661, Upgraded Black Dragon. Amazing. So this is Saint's hand's true foundation? Even after reaching this point, Black Flame still dares to fight. He sure is courageous. It's a pity that the current God's domain is no longer how it was before. Otherwise, with his combat power, it might really be possible to turn things around. How foolish. Is he just being stubborn, or does he really think things are still the same? When the various superpowers members saw Faux unsheath the abyssal blade, their reactions varied from laughing in ridicule, sighing in disappointment, and lamenting. The strength Faux had previously displayed in battle was indeed incredible. It wouldn't be an exaggeration at all to call him a monster. Unfortunately, before a true monster, Feng's strength amounted to nothing. He could only buy time at best. Had he withdrawn when he had the chance instead of provoking Thousand Eyes' group, he wouldn't have fallen into such a predicament. As the various superpowers members were conversing, the abyssal blade in Feng's hand suddenly transformed into a cloud of dark fog that enveloped him completely, then expanded rapidly. When the cloud of fog had grown to a 60-yard radius, a dragon's roar echoed throughout the battlefield, making everyone's soul shudder. Before anyone could react to this roar, a gigantic pitch-black claw emerged from the fog and landed right beside Iron Tooth. The ground under the claw sank as if it was water. In addition, web-like cracks appeared in the space around the claw, the phenomenon making it seem as if the surrounding space could shatter at any time, unable to withstand the power the claw carried. Shortly after the gigantic claw appeared, another dragon's roar dispersed the black fog. When the fog cleared, the figure of a 40-meter-tall black dragon came into view. Despite the black dragon just standing there quietly, everyone felt an indescribable sense of awe and fear welling up within them as they stared at the black dragon. A dragon? What's going on? Everyone was dumbfounded when they saw the black dragon. Dragons were creatures that all players in God's domain knew about because the existence of dragons was synonymous with destruction in God's domain. One could easily find information depicting dragons destroying kingdoms and empires overnight in any of God's domain's libraries. Now that a real dragon appeared before them, everyone was naturally astonished. When Thousand Eyes and the other Saint's Hand members saw the black dragon, their complexions paled drastically. Although they didn't know whether the black dragon before them was real or not, The pressure coming from it was no laughing matter. The black dragon's life rating was undoubtedly leaps and bounds above theirs. Archaic species? Ferocious beasts. Compared to this black dragon, the life ratings of those creatures were insignificant. You asked me how I felt before, right? How do you feel about the situation now? Feng asked calmly as he gazed down at the dumbfounded Iron Tooth standing beside his claw. After his concentration reached the Tier 4 standard, not only did he gain better control over his skills and spells, but his dragon phantom was also more realistic than before. Now the life rating of the phantom he transformed into much more closely matched that of the real Black Dragon King. At this point, despite being a Tier 3 Black Dragon King, his basic attributes nearly rivaled those of mythic-ranked archaic species of the same level. At Feng's words, Iron Tooth's expression turned indescribably grim. An unprecedented fear flooded his heart. How is this possible? Didn't they say that his dragon transformation should push him only to the standard of ordinary mythic monsters? How is he so strong? Iron Tooth was confounded by the gigantic creature before him. Saint's Hand had long since heard about Feng's ability to transform into a dragon. However, whether it was in terms of size, basic attributes, or life rating, the dragon that Feng had just transformed into was on a completely different level from what was stated in Saint's Hand's intelligence report. At this moment, let alone Iron Tooth and the other Saint's Hand members, even Illusory Words was stunned by the situation. Crimson Emperor had collected a lot of information on the fight between Zero Wing and Demon City. Naturally, that information included Feng's black dragon form. However, compared to the black dragon that had attacked Demon City, the black dragon that now stood on the battlefield was like a completely different creature. Even though she was only looking at the black dragon through the magic mirror, she could still feel the aura of death and destruction it exuded. Moreover, she could also faintly sense that the space of the entire battlefield gravitated toward the black dragon. She simply couldn't believe that the black dragon was only a Tier 3 dragon. While everyone was in shock over the black dragon's aura and life rating, the black dragon suddenly raised a claw. Immediately afterward, the place where Iron Tooth stood and the space around it transformed into a pitch-black void. The dozen or so Saint's Hand members who had been standing in this space were nowhere in sight. As for Iron Tooth, his 6-meter-tall figure currently lay inside a newly formed crater over 30 yards from his previous position. Cracks were also spreading across the silver armor protecting Iron Tooth's 2 arms, and his HP had decreased by more than 2 million. Silence. At this moment it was as if time had stopped. What just happened? The fierce man from Crimson Emperor muttered, slack-jawed. As a domain realm expert with basic attributes and a physique rivaling those of Grand Lords of the same level, almost nothing in God's domain could escape his sight. However, he actually hadn't seen what had happened just now. Aside from a momentary black flash in the magic mirror's display and a loud boom, his senses had failed to pick up any other information. So this is his true strength? Purple Eye, who stood a short distance away from Feng, was filled with an indescribable sense of shock when she saw the black void that had appeared near her. Compared to the various superpowers members that were spectating the fight through magic mirrors, she was able to get a much clearer sense of just how much power Feng's attack contained. Monster-level experts? Tier 4 monsters? These things were nothing in front of such overbearing power. Meanwhile, upon seeing this scene, the complexions of Thousand Eyes and the others turned deathly pale. Was Feng still human? Despite Iron Tooth currently being stronger than the Faux Saint Devourer, Feng actually suppressed Berserker to an even greater degree than when he suppressed the Faux Saint Devourer. As for Iron Tooth, who had just stood himself back up inside the distant crater, horror colored his face as he gazed up at the black dragon Feng had transformed into. So close. He was so very close. If not for him having reacted sufficiently quickly and defended himself in time against the black dragon's swipe using his weapon, the consequences would have been unimaginable. It seems your reactions are pretty fast to be able to block that attack of mine, Feng said calmly as he looked down at Iron Tooth. However, how many attacks can you afford to block? Although Feng had casually executed the earlier attack, it still carried the power of an advanced combat technique. Had Iron Tooth failed to raise his weapon in time, he definitely would have suffered tremendously. Just as Feng was about to continue attacking, however, Thousand Eyes suddenly stepped forward. Guild Leader Black Flame, I admit that you are very powerful. However, you'd best not force our hand. Saint's Hand's goal is to maintain stability in God's domain, Thousand Eyes said coldly. If you really kill Irontooth now and break the balance, both the Faux Saint monsters and Saint's Hand definitely won't let Zero Wing off the hook. At that time, Silverwing Town and Zero Wing City will both face the wrath of an army of tens of millions. It was incredibly difficult for mythic-ranked Faux Saint monsters to spawn. Hence, everyone held great importance for both the Faux Saint monsters and Saint's Hand. Now that Irontooth had temporarily merged with the Faux Saint Devourer, killing Irontooth would also kill the Faux Saint Devourer. This definitely wasn't something the Faux Saint monsters and Saint's Hand would tolerate. Upon seeing Thousand Eyes threatening Faux, the spectating superpowers were surprised. This was the first time since Saint's Hand's establishment that such a situation occurred. Normally the guild would just destroy all those that stood in its path. It had never bothered negotiating or making threats at all. It seems Thousand Eyes has been cornered this time. I wonder what Black Flame will do. What else can he do aside from letting them go? Let alone Zero Wing. Even if the superpowers of the several neighboring kingdoms and empires worked together, they still wouldn't be able to prevent Saint's Hand and tens of millions of Faux Saint monsters from retaliating. However, while the various superpowers spectating members were discussing this matter, Faux glanced at Thousand Eyes and said in an ineffably calm voice, "So what?" After saying that, Faux used Dragon Breath on Irontooth and heavily injured him. The Berserker's HP fell by a sizable chunk. In his current state, Irontooth was utterly incapable of combat. Following which, Faux battered Irontooth with claw attacks, one after another, plundering large chunks of HP from the Berserker without pause. Thousand Eyes' complexion went through several shades of red when he saw Feng's wanton assault. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Is he crazy? Is he really not afraid of the Faux Saint monsters and Saint's Hand's retaliation? Zero Wing is doomed. Zero Wing is truly doomed this time. When the various superpowers spectating members saw Irontooth's HP plummeting, they gaped in disbelief. They never thought that Faux would actually ignore the big picture and choose to kill Irontooth. In less than 6 minutes since Faux started his onslaught, Irontooth's HP, which was in the hundreds of millions, zeroed out, his body collapsing lifelessly to the ground. As for Thousand Eyes and the other Saint's Hand members, they merely watched the drubbing with dumbfounded expressions, none of them daring to do anything. Chapter 2662, Continent Shaken, Powerful Return. As Irontooth's 6-meter-tall body started disintegrating into particles of light, everyone standing in the desert woodland could not help but gasp. Despite having absorbed the Faux Saint Devourer's strength, Irontooth had died just like that. Thus far, not a single power or player had managed to kill a Grand Lord-ranked Faux Saint Destroyer, yet Faux had actually succeeded in killing a Faux Saint Devourer. Moreover, he had accomplished this feat while Saint's Hand was protecting the mythic-ranked monster. Meanwhile, as Irontooth's body disappeared, soul ripples spread from his fading corpse up to thousands of yards away. Everyone that came into contact with these soul ripples shuddered involuntarily. A short moment later, several streams of white mist escaped Irontooth's corpse and flew straight into Feng's body. Before he could react, the mist had merged with his soul already. Black Flame, you'll regret your actions today. Now that you've killed the Faux Saint Devourer, it has left a soul mark on you. It won't be long before the other Faux Saint monsters come to find you. They will also obliterate Silverwing Town from the Orc Empire. Thousand Eyes scoffed as he looked at Faux. The higher-ups' instruction was for them to protect the Faux Saint Devourer because the birth of a Faux Saint Devourer was incredibly rare and difficult. Not even one Faux Saint Devourer might appear from tens of thousands of Faux Saint Destroyers. Meanwhile, a Faux Saint Devourer was unimaginably useful to both the Faux Saint monsters and Saint's Hand. However, Faux had not only disregarded Saint's Hand but even killed the Faux Saint Devourer right before everyone's eyes. He had actually snubbed Saint's Hand. This was the first time Thousand Eyes had suffered such humiliation since entering God's domain. Due to the mission's failure, Thousand Eyes wanted to make Faux realize just how foolish his actions were and regret them for the rest of his life. The other Saint's Hand members present also started eyeing Faux with derision. Unlike ordinary monsters, the Faux Saint monsters possessed close bonds with each other. Moreover, the tightness of this bond corresponded with the strength of a Faux Saint monster. With the Faux Saint Devourer analogous to a king among Faux Saint monsters, Killing one was equivalent to becoming enemies with every Faux Saint monster out there. Unless Feng could remove the Faux Saint Devourer's soul mark, all the Faux Saint monsters within a 100,000-yard radius would be able to detect his presence and would try to kill him as long as his soul existed. In other words, they would target him until he deleted his account and started all over again. The complexions of Purple Eye and the others darkened slightly as they looked at Thousand Eyes. They never thought that killing the Faux Saint Devourer would come at such a price. Haha. Black Flame must be dumbfounded right now. If what Thousand Eyes said really is true, then Black Flame and Silverwing Town are both doomed. The various superpowers spectating members laughed along with Thousand Eyes. The power of Feng's dragon transformation was shocking and could even be called unmatched. They could tell that Zero Wing would most likely be making a strong comeback. However, Thousand Eyes' words dispelled all their worries. The current Silverwing Town's defensive capability was indeed very strong. After all, it had not only a Tier 4 NPC guarding it but also the protection of a monstrous player like Feng. However, when besieged by an army of millions or possibly even tens of millions of Faux Saint monsters, even a main city-ranked NPC city would fall very quickly, let alone Silverwing Town. Just as everyone thought that Feng would reveal signs of regret or fear, however, the swordsman turned to look at Thousand Eyes in an indescribably calm gaze. You want to see me regretting? You'll have to be able to leave this place alive first to do that. After saying so, Feng stalked toward Thousand Eyes' team, each step he took setting the ground a-tremble. At this moment, it felt as if the whole world was angry. Upon seeing his approach, Thousand Eyes and the other Saints' Hand members paled drastically. Black Flame, you better not go too far. We are members of Saints' Hand's Trump Card Legion. If you kill us, Saints' Hand will not forgive Zero Wing. That's right. If you wish to stay alive and keep Silverwing Town standing, your only choice is to work with Saints' Hand. Otherwise, both you and Zero Wing will be devoured by those Faux Saint monsters. Faced with the 40-meter-tall black dragon and the overbearing aura it exuded, Saints' Hand's peak experts and even Thousand Eyes, a domain realm expert, were overwhelmed with unspeakable terror. Their minds blanked out, preventing them from properly controlling their bodies. They couldn't escape even though they wanted to. This scene flabbergasted the various spectating superpowers. For a moment, they doubted that the people displayed on their magic mirrors were actually the members of one of Saints' Hand's Trump Card Legions, who normally showed no respect even to the various superpowers. Before the various superpowers spectating members could dismiss their doubts, Feng had already arrived before Thousand Eyes and slowly raised one of his massive claws. You don't need to concern yourselves with this. After Feng said so, he sent a claw smashing into Thousand Eyes' team. First Sword Light Shadow. In the next moment, the phantom of a gigantic dragon's claw descended from the sky, so immense and powerful that Thousand Eyes and the others couldn't dodge or defend themselves. In the blink of an eye, Thousand Eyes and the others were sent to the void, together with the ground beneath them. Silence. Destruction. Death. For a moment, time in the desert woodland seemed to freeze. Even the various superpowers members that were spectating from Silverwing Town stared at the magic mirrors before them with dumbfounded expressions, unable to believe their eyes. They got killed just like that? Those are experts that Saints' Hand had invested a fortune in nurturing. With this, Saints' Hand definitely won't let Zero Wing off the hook. Is he really Black Flame? Unlike normal players, the experts of Saints' Hand's Trump Card Legions had relied on special methods to gain astonishing basic attributes. Hence, the death penalties they suffered were also far greater than that of normal players. By killing Thousand Eyes' team, Feng had basically crippled half of the Trump Card Legion they belonged to. It would be strange if Saints' Hand did not try to take revenge on Zero Wing. Despite Zero Wing's fate already hanging on the line, now that it had to go up against the Faux Saint army, Feng had actually annihilated Thousand Eyes' team, instead of trying to mend his relationship with Saints' Hand to improve Zero Wing's chances of survival. What Feng just did basically pushed Zero Wing further down the path of no return. However, even after annihilating Thousand Eyes' team, Feng remained calm like usual as if he had just killed a bunch of mobs. After giving Purple Eye some instructions as well as gifting the weapons and equipment of Saints' Hand's members to the Patrol Army's members, he flew off to the distant Silverwing Town. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Shortly after Feng left the battlefield, News regarding the events in the desert woodlands started spreading like wildfire. Black Flame's shocking return to Silverwing town. Mythic ranked Faux Saint Devourer gets killed. Black Flame single-handedly annihilates one of Saint's Hand's trump card legions. These shocking pieces of information shook the entire eastern continent one after another. Chapter 2663, He's Back. Cold Spring Forest, Stone Forest City, Freedom Hotel. Inside a splendorous meeting room, several dozen Tier 3 experts exuding powerful auras were currently seated around a round table. However, despite the number of people present, the room was remarkably quiet. Careful observation of the people present would discover that quite a few of them radiated intense bloodlust and were enveloped by extremely dense darkness energy. Ordinary dark players were no match for these people in these two aspects. These people were none other than Dark Rhapsody's upper echelon and the commanders of a few of the Dark World's top adventurer teams. Aside from these experts from the Dark World, the other Tier 3 experts seated around the table also had extraordinary origins. Among them were the upper echelon of the super first-rate guild Unyielding Soul and the guild leaders of first-rate guilds, as well as the commanders and vice-commanders of top adventurer teams. Meanwhile, every one of these VIPs was looking at a woman wearing an advanced Master Forger's insignia. Despite this woman lacking a powerful aura, everyone was treating her as the chairperson of this meeting. Currently, however, this woman appeared indescribably haggard. I hope that everyone present can increase the support you provide to counter Starlink and the various superpowers' harassment. Zero Wing will make sure that everyone receives proper compensation. Aside from this topic, does anybody have anything else they wish to raise? Melancholic Smile asked as she swept her gaze across the people present. Ever since Feng and Zero Wing's main force members left for the Western continent, Starlink and the various superpowers had constantly been harassing Stone Forest City. Economic suppression, material plundering and field ambushes occurred at almost every instant. To make matters worse, as the number of Tier 3 players the various superpowers possessed increased, the area the Night Legion could protect also shrank. Moreover, aside from Feng, both vice guild leaders of Zero Wing were also inaccessible. As a result, Melancholic Smile had to shoulder the burden of leading Zero Wing temporarily. However, with the unstable factors surrounding Stone Forest City increasing continuously, the number of players that dared operate in Stone Forest City decreased. This took a toll on the city's economy. At this point, the city's daily income wasn't even half of what the city made during its peak. Meanwhile, in order to ensure the safety of Stone Forest City, Zero Wing City, and Silverwing Town, Zero Wing had no choice but to increase the security measures implemented, which in turn increased the guild's daily expenditure substantially. We are facing some problems in the Dark World as well. Recently, because of the increase in the number of Tier 3 players, many of the Dark World's powers have partnered up and launched several attacks on the teleportation gate already. Currently, we are still able to stop these attacks, but I'm afraid this situation won't last for very long, Dark Rhapsody's Blue Rainbow said helplessly to Melancholic Smile. In addition, world domination is growing restless. Judging from the information we collected, we believe world domination will mount a large-scale operation soon. Hence, we hope that Zero Wing can give us more of the Freedom Hotel's resources, so that we can rope in more of the Dark World's powers and maintain a stable hold over the teleportation gate. Upon hearing Blue Rainbow's words, Liang Jing, sitting beside Melancholic Smile, frowned slightly. A large part of the reason why Stone Forest City could maintain its current income was the Freedom Hotel. In order to ensure Stone Forest City's safety, they had obtained the help of the various powers and adventurer teams in exchange for the Freedom Hotel's rooms. Thus far, they had already given out quite a few rooms. If they gave out even more, not only would Zero Wing have fewer rooms for its own use, but the Freedom Hotel's income would also decrease significantly, possibly to the point where Zero Wing's current expenditures became unsustainable. However, the Dark World's teleportation gate was also provided a considerable portion of Zero Wing's income. This was especially true for magic crystals. It was similarly something that Zero Wing could not afford to lose. I understand. I'll consider this matter and give you an answer as soon as possible, Melancholic Smile said as she massaged her temples. If there are no other problems, we'll adjourn for today. After Melancholic Smile said so, everyone present promptly left their seats. At this time, Unyielding Soul's Mu Lingsha approached Melancholic Smile. Miss Melancholic, Please feel free to ask if you come across any difficulty in funding. Unyielding Soul and Zero Wing are old allies. While we might not be able to provide additional manpower, we can still allocate some funds to help Zero Wing, Xianxia said quietly as she looked at Melancholic Smile, who currently wore a worried expression on her face. Thank you, Melancholic Smile said. In reality, we don't really have any problems with regard to funding. The crucial problem is the various superpowers that are targeting Stone Forest City, as well as the management of Starmoon Kingdom and the Black Dragon Empire. If the main force members were around, those superpowers would hold back somewhat instead of working with Starlink to target Zero Wing's members. Now, it is becoming increasingly difficult for Zero Wing's members to develop in Starmoon Kingdom and the Black Dragon Empire. Currently, funding was still a small problem for Zero Wing. The really urgent matter now was the guild's lack of Tier 3 experts. If not for Unyielding Soul sending quite a number of its Tier 3 experts to help maintain Stone Forest City's security during this period, Stone Forest City would have definitely ended up in an even more miserable state. Right, Vice Guild Leader Mu? Is there still no news about the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion's Phoenix Pavilion Master? Melancholic Smile asked. Zero Wing had partnered with the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion's Phoenix Rain on many occasions before. The two sides could be considered to be in an absolute alliance. Melancholic Smile and Phoenix Rain were also fairly close friends, as the two of them had come into frequent contact with each other because of the business relationship between their two guilds. Originally, after the various superpowers started targeting Stone Forest City, Melancholic Smile had sought Phoenix Rain's help to solve some of the problems Zero Wing encountered in the Black Dragon Empire. However, no matter how she tried contacting Phoenix Rain, she couldn't get through at all. It was as if Phoenix Rain had disappeared from God's domain. In fact, even the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion's members did not know Phoenix Rain's whereabouts. We have already sent a lot of people to investigate this matter. It is truly strange. Let alone Phoenix Rain and her trusted subordinates, even the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion's Ku Rong 9 Dragons Emperor, and many others of the guild's upper echelon have disappeared. Currently, the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion is relying entirely on its Grand Elders to operate. According to the information we got, even those Grand Elders don't know what is going on, Xianxia said. Disappeared. Melancholic Smile was stunned when she heard Xianxia's words. The core upper echelon of a super first-rate guild had actually disappeared overnight without any news. Who would possibly dare believe this? However, I also heard that Mythology invited the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion to the Faux Saint Alliance discussion that it is holding in the Fire Dragon Empire. Once this alliance discussion ends, we might receive some news regarding the Phoenix Pavilion Master, Xianxia said. Alliance discussion? Melancholic Smile's complexion turned even more haggard when she heard this phrase. It seems we are really in trouble this time. Ostensibly, Mythology's alliance discussion would focus on the problem of the Faux Saint monsters. In reality, Mythology was simply trying to rope in the various superpowers to capture Stone Forest City. If the various superpowers come to an agreement on how to split Stone Forest City's profits during this upcoming discussion, then the next step would be for them to attack Stone Forest City. With Stone Forest City's current defenses, it could fend off the various superpowers' joint assault, but such a war would destroy Stone Forest City's economy. Melancholic Smile wasn't the only person suffering a headache over this matter. Xianxia was not having a good time either. After all, Mythology's alliance discussion this time wouldn't target just Zero Wing but also Unyielding Soul. Unyielding Soul was falling into an increasingly precarious situation, yet she couldn't do anything about it. This was because 15 superpowers were attending the alliance discussion this time, 3 of which were super guilds, making it undoubtedly the grandest meeting ever held on the Eastern continent. If all of these superpowers worked together, the strength they could unleash would be unimaginable. Just as Melancholic Smile and Xianxia were feeling helpless, Liang Jing, who was at one side, reading a message, suddenly revealed a rare smile. No, it's not us who are in trouble but them. Liang Jing exclaimed excitedly. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. What happened? Both Melancholic Smile and Xianxia were confused by Liang Jing's sudden about-face. They could not understand why she was smiling at all. He's back. The guild leader. The guild leader is back. Chapter 2664 Zero Wing in an uproar. Everyone's plans, both Melancholic Smile and Mu Lingsha, were stunned upon hearing Liang Jing's words. You managed to contact the guild leader? Melancholic Smile asked excitedly. The current Zero Wing was in an extremely tight spot, as all of the guild's top combatants were absent. However, this still wasn't the most important point. The crucial thing was that morale in the guild had fallen to an unprecedented low. Feng had always been Zero Wing's backbone. His return might not be able to drag Zero Wing out of its current predicament, but it would be able to unite the hearts of Zero Wing's members. Moreover, his return would also strengthen the confidence of Zero Wing's various partners. After all, the main reason why these powers had partnered with Zero Wing in the first place was Feng. At this moment, let alone Melancholic Smile, even Mu Lingsha gazed at Liang Jing eagerly, wanting to know if Feng had truly returned or not. If Feng had truly returned to the Eastern continent, the various superpowers would naturally have to reconsider their decision to join hands with Starlink and target Zero Wing. Even if their alliance remained standing, they wouldn't be as united as before. Not yet, Liang Jing said, shaking her head. I only received a report that the guild leader is currently in Silverwing town. After saying so, Liang Jing forwarded the report to Melancholic Smile for her inspection. However, when Melancholic Smile and Mu Lingsha finished reading the report Liang Jing shared with them, the excitement on their faces disappeared, replaced by indescribable grimness. How could this be? Melancholic Smile could not help growing anxious after reading the report. Quick! Gather the elite personal guards and contact Hell Rush's team. We need to head to Silverwing town as soon as possible. The fact that Feng killed a mythic-ranked Faux Saint Devourer was indeed astonishing. Such exciting news would definitely heighten morale. However, the retaliation of millions of Faux Saint monsters was no laughing matter. Not to mention, Saint's hand wouldn't sit still and do nothing after suffering humiliation. At that time, Silverwing town would have to go up against several million Faux Saint monsters, as well as Saint's hand's experts. With Silverwing town's defenses, stopping such a force would be utterly impossible. Meanwhile, if Feng were to end up getting devoured by those Faux Saint monsters, the consequences for Zero Wing would be unimaginable. Let's not panic first. Those Faux Saint monsters and Saint's hand won't take action so soon. They will need some time to amass their forces. I'll contact Unyielding Heart and have him lead a team over to Silverwing town immediately, Mu Lingsha said, pacifying Melancholic Smile. Thank you, Melancholic Smile said as she nodded in gratitude. She then took a deep breath to calm herself before methodically arranging for the necessary manpower to send to Silverwing town. Meanwhile, as Melancholic Smile and the others were leading an army to Silverwing town, the various superpowers were reeling from the news of Feng's return. They never thought that Feng would reappear after disappearing for such a long time. Or to put it in another way, the Sword King of old had returned. Moreover, Feng's individual combat power had even reached unbelievable heights. His dragon transformation actually allowed him to effortlessly kill a mythic-ranked Faux Saint Devourer. The Sword King was far more frightening than before. This astonishing transformation would also make Zero Wing even more difficult to deal with. After all, compared to a guild with weak morale and divided opinions, a united guild with strong morale would be capable of exhibiting much greater combat power. Fire Dragon Empire, Flame Dragon City, Scorching Flame Restaurant. The Scorching Flame restaurant towered over 30 stories above the city center. At this moment, a female level 116 Guardian Knight clad in black gold armor entered the top floor room of the restaurant. The Guardian Knight radiated a frightening aura that suppressed even the ambient mana around her. However, when this Guardian Knight arrived before the woman currently dining inside the room, she gave a very respectful bow. Vice Guild Leader Shadow, Black Flame has returned to the Eastern Continent, White Feather reported as she placed a document before Cold Shadow. She then continued, like we guessed, he has become much stronger than before. As a result, Zero Wing and its partners have regained their confidence. Even the Secret Pavilion has dispatched more manpower to help defend Stone Forest City. Currently, the various superpowers are hotly discussing this matter. Should we still proceed with our original plan and hold the alliance discussion? Of course. He merely killed one Faux Saint Devourer. The big picture remains the same. Proceed according to plan, Cold Shadow said, a seductive smile appearing on her face. Those superpowers are no fools either. They should understand that times have changed. If they wish to survive in the new era, their only option is to plunder more resources for themselves. Not to mention both Black Flame and Silverwing Town won't survive much longer. Although Shifeng's return had indeed shocked the various superpowers, that was it. After all, one would have trouble adapting to the changes in the rapidly developing Eastern continent, even if one left the continent for just 2 or 3 days. Shifeng had disappeared from the Eastern continent for around 2 weeks. Moreover, there was also the activation of the Demon Gods Chaos Expansion Pack, as well as the outbreak of the Faux Saint monsters. The current Eastern continent was not the Eastern continent of 2 weeks ago. One could say that Shifeng's time had already passed. The threat he posed to the various superpowers was no longer as great as before. In the current God's domain, Tier 3 experts were no longer as rare as before. Even the various top adventurer teams boasted over 100 Tier 3 experts under their command, let alone the various first-rate guilds and superpowers. Hence, it was now incredibly difficult for powerful individuals like Shifeng to accomplish great feats on their own. Tier 3 personal guards were also no longer as great of a threat to players as they were before. Understood. I'll notify the various superpowers, then. White Feather nodded before leaving the Scorching Flame restaurant. While the Eastern continent's various superpowers were discussing Shifeng's return, Shifeng himself had gone to Zero Wing's residence in Silverwing Town to rest. Guild leader, as per your instructions, we have started secretly transferring the crippled NPCs and elite Tier 3 personal guards. It shouldn't be long before they arrive in town. We have also tasked people to monitor the gaming cabins of the vice guild leaders and the others. As soon as they leave that special space, we will know about it, Yulan reported to Shifeng, who was currently browsing the latest news regarding the Eastern continent. All right. They should be able to get out of that place in a few more days. If they arrive inside the Faux Saint monster's territory, send a rescue team immediately, Shifeng said, nodding. Although he doubted that Zero Wing's main force members would have any problems dealing with the Faux Saint monsters, if they got surrounded by a large number of Faux Saint destroyers or encountered a Faux Saint Devourer, they might still get killed. Meanwhile, the enhanced death penalty from dying to a Faux Saint monster was something he didn't want Zero Wing's main force members to suffer. Guild leader, are you really fine in your present condition? Yulan asked worriedly. Not only did Shifeng lose contact with the outside world for such a long period, but he had even spent all this time lying inside his virtual gaming cabin, completely reliant on the cabin's nutrient solution to sustain himself. His physical body couldn't be unaffected. Not to mention he had just experienced such an intense battle and had a soul mark placed on him. Who knew if that soul mark would have any side effects or not? If Shifeng were to collapse from overwork now and suffered lasting damage to his body, it would be putting the cart before the horse. Relax. I'm really fine, Shifeng said, chuckling. In fact, my mind is in exceptionally good condition right now. New ideas are popping up in my mind from time to time, and they're making me eager to start training. It's good that you're fine. However, if you feel sick, you must log off and rest immediately. You can leave the other matters to us, Yulan said. After seeing that Shifeng was indeed in good spirits, she stopped trying to persuade him to rest and left the office to handle the other tasks he had given her. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Meanwhile, after Yulan left, Shifeng stopped browsing the Eastern continent's news. He then focused on the several strands of mist the Faux Saint Devourer had sent into his body. This wasn't his first time receiving a soul mark. Normally, players couldn't sense the soul mark that plagued them. However, he could actually clearly sense it inside his mind. He could even sense the white mist circling his brain. This situation intrigued him. Following which, Shifeng focused all his attention on the several strands of mist meandering through his mind. His expression suddenly changed. No, that's not right. This isn't a soul mark but a soul array. Chapter 2665, Magic Array that upgrades the soul. Looking at the strands of white mist hovering around in his mind, coupled with the countless sparkles of light around the mist, Shifeng could not help being surprised. In God's domain, magic arrays were generally made out of mana. However, some magic arrays were not made up of just mana but had other things mixed in as well. Meanwhile, the magic array he was looking at had traces of soul. I never thought that the rumored soul array actually existed. Shifeng revealed an ecstatic look on his face as he observed the white mist circulating in his brain. He had only ever heard of soul arrays. He had never actually seen one before. According to the rumors he had heard, the soul array was a magic array capable of changing a player's soul. Of course, there were also mentions that the soul array devoured a player's soul. In short, there were many rumors surrounding soul arrays. However, there was one thing Feng was certain of. A soul array could upgrade a player's soul. Logically, it shouldn't be possible for players to upgrade their soul. That was only possible for NPCs. However, the soul array made the impossible possible. And according to the several testaments Feng heard in his previous life, once a player had their soul upgraded, even an ordinary expert would become a powerhouse in God's domain. In fact, some experts had even managed to reach Tier 5 thanks to the upgrade. Nevertheless, most people that heard these rumors and testaments about the soul array's existence and functions had dismissed them as tall tales. They felt that even without the soul array, the experts that had given their testaments about the soul array would still have become powerhouses in God's domain. Hence, most players in God's domain had treated the existence of soul arrays as a joke. Now, however, Feng was actually looking at a soul array himself. Of course, unless one was an advanced magician, one would most likely have a difficult time recognizing these strands of mist as a magic array. Most people would treat it as a soul mark. Thankfully, I checked it in time. Had I waited a few more days, I might have lost this opportunity. Feng sighed in relief when he saw the strands of silver mist gradually thinning out. The soul array within him was being powered by the Faux Saint Devourer's soul energy and mana. While replenishing the soul array's mana was an easy task, replenishing the soul energy was not. At least Feng had no idea how he could do so. Hence the soul array would not last for very long. Of course, so long as this soul array existed, the Faux Saint monsters would be able to perceive his presence. The soul array's existence could be considered both good fortune and misfortune. Having thought up to this point, Feng promptly started studying the soul array in his brain. The soul array had merely been imprinted onto his brain. The magic array itself wasn't active. If he wished to let the soul array exhibit its real effects, he would have to activate it first. Sure enough, this soul array really is complex. Just from what I can see, it is made up of at least 40 basic master magic arrays and over a dozen advanced master magic arrays, 3 of which are almost at the Grandmaster standard. Moreover, I have to rely on my own spiritual will to activate this soul array, and even the slightest mistake will result in my soul getting devoured. It's no wonder some people labeled it a magic array that devours players' souls. After inspecting the soul array for half an hour, Feng was flabbergasted by his findings. The soul was something illusory. There was no describing it with words, much less upgrading it or weakening it. However, the soul array within him could actually accomplish this feat easily. This was simply unbelievable. Unfortunately, the risks involved in activating the soul array were ridiculous. Of the 2 possible outcomes, one was heaven while the other was hell. There was nothing in between. If ordinary experts were presented with such a choice, they probably would not hesitate to give activating the soul array a try. After all, the potential gains far outstripped the potential losses. Even if they got their souls damaged, the worst outcome would be remaining stuck at Tier 3 forever. For ordinary experts, this would most likely be the case anyway, even if they didn't have their souls weakened. However, it was a completely different story for Feng. His potential losses outweighed his potential gains. With his current standards, he should have no problem reaching Tier 5. If he had his soul damaged now, then reaching Tier 5 would become a problem. After all, the higher the tier players reached, the lower the importance of weapons, equipment, and bloodlines. Instead, individual strength was what mattered most. Do I give up? Feng hesitated despite himself as he considered the gradually dissipating soul array in his mind. As the soul array would be used on his soul, he only had one chance at activating it. If he messed up the activation, the soul array would backfire and devour his soul instead. However, if he succeeded, then the soul array would upgrade his soul. No, it's not hopeless. After debating for some time, Feng thought of a possibility. He then took out Augustus's damaged heart from his bag. It was incredibly rare for players to come across opportunities to upgrade their souls. So long as he successfully activated the soul array, he would have a much easier time challenging not only a Tier 4 promotion quest of greater difficulty but also future promotions. In fact, the help he could gain from an upgraded soul would be much greater than what he could gain from a piece of legendary equipment. It would be a huge waste to discard this opportunity. Meanwhile, there were 2 ways he could drastically increase his chances of successfully activating the soul array. The first method was to familiarize himself with the magic arrays used to make the entire soul array. However, the soul array was extremely complex. At his current standards, he might need 2 whole weeks to learn and memorize all the magic arrays. The second method was to improve his mental state so that he could guide his spiritual will through the soul array with greater precision. For others, both of these methods would be incredibly difficult. However, that was not the case for Faux. Augustus's damaged heart was capable of releasing eternal energy when activated. Eternal energy was many times superior to mana. It could elevate a player's mental state to its very peak. Be it familiarizing himself with the soul array or guiding his spiritual will through the soul array, eternal energy would be of great help. With eternal energy, his chances of successfully activating the soul array would increase considerably. The only problem was that Augustus's damaged heart had a 3-month cooldown. Of course, there was also the option of using 1 god crystal to circumvent the cooldown. While this was incredibly expensive, spending 1 god crystal to upgrade his soul would be well worth it. Following which, Faux took out the last god crystal he had and placed it inside Augustus's damaged heart. He then activated the heart's magic array. Immediately, streams of purple mist flowed out of Augustus's heart and converged around Faux. At the same time, a refreshing feeling spread across his body. His thoughts also became much clearer than before. Good. Let's begin. Taking a deep breath, Faux started carefully analyzing the soul array's components one after another. 2 hours, 4 hours, 6 hours. Originally, it should have taken Faux at least a dozen days to learn the soul array. However, with the help of eternal energy, he learned and familiarized himself with all of the soul array's components in just a little over 7 hours. He had even achieved rough mastery of a pseudo-grandmaster magic array that could be used to exert a little control over souls. Now that I've familiarized myself with all of the magic arrays, next up will be to utilize my spiritual will to activate them. Looking at the soul array in his mind, he could not help some slight nervousness. Although he had familiarized himself with all of the component arrays, activating them was an entirely different matter. After all, the activation of each magic array required him to split his spiritual will into multiple strands. The difficulty of doing so was incredibly high. After mentally preparing himself for several minutes, Faux then started guiding his spiritual will through the magic arrays in his mind. 1 magic array activated. 2 magic arrays activated. 3 magic arrays activated. With each subsequent magic array Faux activated, the difficulty increased. Initially, he needed to split his spiritual will only into 3 strands. By the 4th magic array, that number increased to 6. Fortunately for an expert like Faux, such a task was not particularly difficult. Hence, the activation of the magic arrays proceeded in an orderly manner. Time passed quickly. Before Faux realized it, more than 20 minutes had gone by already. At this point, the sweat from his forehead had already drenched the light armor he wore. The last one. The final magic array actually required Faux to split his spiritual will into 17 strands. This final magic array was also the one he was most familiar with. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Suddenly, a crisp sound echoed in his mind. In the next moment, the soul array's core magic array shattered, followed by the shattering of the other component arrays in a domino effect. Meanwhile, the several strands of white mist circulating in Faux's mind transformed into countless particles of light that merged into his brain. Is it done? Faux was stunned when he saw this scene inside his mind. Chapter 2666, Soul Upgraded Natural Domain. Zero Wing's residence, Guild Leader's office. Sitting quietly on his chair, Faux suddenly opened his eyes, his mind roiling with confusion. Just a second ago he clearly sensed that he had successfully activated the core magic array. In the next second, however, the soul array had shattered so thoroughly that no traces remained whatsoever. It was as if the soul array had never existed in his mind. What is going on here? Did I succeed or fail? After confirming the absence of the soul array, Faux tried moving his body a little. However, he did not detect any changes or discomfort in his body. It was as if everything that had happened was an illusion. From what he understood of the soul array, so long as players successfully activated it, their souls would receive an upgrade, and their game character's natural talent would receive a significant improvement. On the other hand, if players failed to activate the soul array, their souls would get devoured, and their natural talent would deteriorate significantly, which would in turn eliminate almost all chances for further improvement. However, he currently didn't feel any different from before he tried activating the soul array. Both his physical body and mental state felt normal, neither more active nor sluggish. Could this soul array be a sham? After pondering for some time, Feng could come up with only this conclusion. Instead of the real deal, the soul array, planted in his mind, was merely a somewhat special soul mark. No other explanation made sense. Of course, there was one other possibility. All the information he obtained regarding the soul array in the past was false. The soul array did not possess the ability to alter a player's soul at all, and everyone who supposedly experienced these effects had only been imagining things. At this point, Feng could not help but sigh. If that really was the case, then he had suffered a huge loss this time. He had spent one god crystal to reset the cooldown on Augustus's damaged heart. Previously, in order to help out the guild's core members, he had spent most of the god crystals he had on hand and kept only one for himself just in case. Now he had wasted his last god crystal. Just as a wave of depression washed over Feng, Yulan knocked on his door and entered the room. Guild leader, Melancholic, and the others have arrived. In addition, the 300-plus disabled NPCs are already in the residence's plaza. We can start the ceremony at any time, Yulan said, finding the look of depression on Feng's face a little strange. All right. Have the NPCs wait on the second underground floor first. Have Melancholic make the necessary preparations as well. I still need some time to myself, Feng said, nodding. I'll inform them then, Yulan said before leaving the office. After she left, Feng took out the memory crystal the Crimson-Eyed Sword Saint had given him. Since Augustus's heart was still pumping out eternal energy, he planned to use this opportunity to learn Alvo's legacy. In God's domain, God crystals were rarer than even epic weapons and equipment. Coming across one was highly dependent on luck. Now that he had wasted a God crystal to activate Augustus's heart, he naturally couldn't let even a second of its duration go to waste. Otherwise, he would have to wait 3 months or obtain another God crystal to activate it again. The instant Feng tried to inject his mana into the memory crystal, a white mist actually formed around the crystal, stunning him. This materialized mana? How is this possible? Mana was intangible. Players could only rely on their senses and imagination to control it. Even then, they could exert only simple control over mana. Trying to concentrate the density of thin mana was beyond even Tier 4 players who had basic control over mana. Normally, players would be capable of such a feat only after reaching the Advanced Master Magician standard. Feng had just recently reached the Intermediate Master Magician standard, yet this materialized mana indicated that he had actually reached the Advanced Master Magician standard already. He could hardly believe it. An Advanced Master Magician. Although the Magician class was only a subclass in God's domain, the Advanced Master Magician standard was a realm all Tier 4 experts sought to reach. At the Advanced Master Magician standard, players could rely on their will to manipulate the mana around them, utilizing the ambient mana as if it were an extension of their bodies. They could have their own natural domain. An ordinary Tier 3 player who reached the Advanced Master Magician standard would be invincible among all opponents below Tier 4. The true Tier 4 standard, not monsters or players that possessed basic attributes at the Tier 4 standard. One could easily imagine how powerful the Advanced Master Magician subclass was. Could this be the soul array's effects? This was the only explanation Feng could come up with for this situation after giving the matter some thought. Manipulating intangible mana was an incredibly complex task. Players needed a lot of time to adapt their minds before they could do it. Now, however, he could exert a great degree of control over mana despite barely putting any thought to the task. It was as if his mind had automated this process for him. Amazing. Truly amazing. The change to my magical talent is simply heaven-defying. Feng was filled with an indescribable sense of shock as he controlled the mana domain that had naturally formed around him. Currently, he could freely control all the mana within a 30-yard radius as if it were one of his limbs. With just a thought, he could have the ambient mana attack someone. Moreover, this attack would carry power at the peak of Tier 3, just by him materializing the ambient mana. If he were to use a magic array, the power he could exhibit would be even greater. After a brief moment of excitement, Feng calmed himself and put away the Crimson-Eyed Sword Saint's memory crystal. He then took out a tattered notebook from his bag. Originally, I thought that I could learn this thing's contents only after reaching Tier 4. I never dreamed that I could actually learn them now. That Faux Saint Devourer really has helped me a bunch, Feng muttered, chuckling as he looked at the notebook in his hands. The notebook he held was none other than the mana-forging notes he had received from the famed smith Alba Grey. Although he had only one volume of the mana-forging notes, the value of this one volume could easily rival that of a legendary item. It was an item that the various empires of God's domain would go crazy over. This was because the forging techniques recorded within the mana-forging notes could serve as the foundation of an empire. Of course, learning the recorded forging techniques was an incredibly difficult task. Firstly, one had to have reached the Advanced Master Magician standard. This requirement was because Alba Grey's mana forging techniques were different from conventional forging techniques, which prioritized the materials used. Instead, Alba Grey's techniques prioritized mana, while the materials used were only of secondary importance. One could consider Alba Grey's techniques a kind of lost ancient technology. Feng immediately started manipulating the mana around him to break the mana seal on the notebook. In order to remove the mana seal, one needed to use one's mana to decode it. Utilizing brute force would permanently destroy the notebook's contents. The mana seal consisted of 27 magic arrays, every one of which was at the basic Grandmaster standard. The degree of precision one needed to have when decoding these magic arrays was akin to threading a needle. Only those capable of freely manipulating mana would succeed in lifting the mana seal. This was also the reason why Feng had left the mana forging notes sitting inside his bag all this time. After working on the mana seal for more than 2 hours, Feng finally decoded the last magic array on the mana forging notes. Immediately, all mana within his office seemed to have been summoned, as it surged toward the mana forging notes. This mana then transformed into texts and images that flowed into his brain. For a time Feng felt as if his head would explode. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. The amount of information contained within the mana forging notes was comparable to that of the small mobile fortress design. If not for his concentration having reached the Tier 4 standard already, he would have most definitely lost consciousness. The information transfer continued for 20 minutes. Then the mana forging notes closed itself, and the mana seal reappeared on it. As for Feng, he slumped back in his chair, his complexion indescribably pale. However, despite his miserable state, his eyes sparkled with joy and shock. Before Feng could snap out of his daze, he suddenly received a call request from Yulan. Guild leader, we just received news that the Faux Saint monster army is currently crossing Star Moon Kingdom's borders. Rough estimates put its numbers at over 4 million. We have also spotted some of Saint's Hand's members among the monsters, Yulan reported anxiously. They're finally here? Feng revealed a faint smile on his face when he heard Yulan's words. Have Melancholic and the others ready the materials. I'll head over immediately. Chapter 2667, Foundation Skyrockets Silverwing Town, Zero Wings Residence, second underground floor. At this moment over 300 NPCs stood inside an underground hall, which was half the size of a football field. These NPCs all looked old and injured. The 100-plus Tier 3 experts of Zero Wing present could not help their confusion over the presence of these NPCs. With the situation outside so tense already, why did the guild leader gather us here instead of having us prepare for battle? A tall and thin level 115 man wearing the emblem of Zero Wing's main force reserve member muttered, perturbed. This tall and thin man was once the vice commander of an adventurer team. He had joined Zero Wing not that long ago and had gained his position as a reserve member of the main force only after Feng had left the eastern continent. Hence he did not have a very clear idea of just how powerful the guild's foundations were. What the man understood very clearly was just how powerful the Faux Saint monsters were, especially after their numbers reached a certain scale. Several million Faux Saint monsters charging towards Silverwing Town was definitely a disaster. However, instead of further strengthening the town's defenses, Feng had actually gathered all of the guild's Tier 3 reserve main force members tasked with defending Silverwing Town in this basement hall. In fact, he had even kept them waiting here for such a long time with nothing to do but look at these old and ailing NPCs. This was simply insane. At this moment, many of the Tier 3 experts present were also confused by this situation. Silverwing Town was by no means a small place. There were many locations that needed defending. They still needed to organize the guild's other Tier 3 experts and Tier 2 members. They had already been tight for time, yet they had actually wasted 2 whole hours idling here. The players gathered could not help but wonder if Faux had given up on Silverwing Town already. To Zero Wing's core upper echelon, Silverwing Town might be just another one of the guild's residences. However, for players like themselves who had lived in Silverwing Town all this time, it was their home. Just as everyone was grumbling about the current situation, Yulan and Melancholic Smile walked to the staircase leading upstairs. They then flanked the staircase and quietly looked at the man descending it, a respectful expression appearing on their faces. Guild Leader, all Tier 3 Reserve main force members with a position of Viscount or above are here. They have already signed the confidentiality contract. With the personal guard slots they have, we will be able to accommodate all of the NPCs gathered. Melancholic Smile quietly reported to Faux. Alright, let's begin, Faux said, nodding. Originally, he had been keeping the Water of Life top secret. After all, only by doing so would he have an easier time collecting injured NPCs with good potential. However, now that God's domain had developed to such a state, he no longer had the leeway for such secrecy. After Faux said so, Melancholic Smile had the gathered NPCs line up before her. She then distributed the Water of Life to every one of them, the situation further confusing the reserve main force members present. What are they doing? What dense life energy? Why do all these NPCs look so excited? Many people knew of the Water of Life in God's domain, but not many people had seen it in person. In the eyes of Zero Wing's reserve main force members, Melancholic Smile was merely distributing potions brimming with life energy to the NPCs gathered. However, when these NPCs received the potion, their gloomy and lifeless expressions immediately brightened up, their eyes glowing with hope and energy. Every one of these NPCs even excitedly thanked Melancholic Smile and swore loyalty to her. This situation baffled the Zero Wing members. They could all tell that these NPCs were not personal guards but independent NPCs. There should be no way these NPCs would show such gratitude toward players, much less take the initiative to swear loyalty to a player. As the reserve main force members were stewing in confusion, frightening auras burst forth from the gathered NPCs, one after another. Previously, none of these gathered NPCs was a match even for ordinary Tier 2 NPCs. Now, however, even the weakest of them radiated an aura that made even the refinement realm experts present shudder. When the auras of these 300+ NPCs flooded the hall, the 100+ reserve main force members could not help stumbling back with nervous expressions as they cautiously eyed the NPCs before them. At this moment they could tell that so long as these NPCs willed it, none of them would leave this basement alive. Not to mention the strongest few auras even made them feel as if they stood before a bottomless abyss. The owners of these auras were definitely not just ordinary Tier 3 NPCs. While bathed in these auras, everyone felt as if they were standing inside a muddy swamp, their bodies incredibly sluggish. In fact, they had also lost control over the ambient mana around them. A mana domain? At this moment, even Yulan goggled in shock at this situation. Although she knew that Faux and Melancholic Smile had gathered these old and ailing NPCs for a purpose, she never imagined that they would be carrying out such an ambitious enterprise. Not only did they instantly turn 300+ old and ailing NPCs into lively tigers, but 3 of these NPCs even possessed a mana domain. This was simply unbelievable. Normally, a naturally occurring mana domain was something only Tier 4 NPCs possessed. A mana domain was also the biggest difference between Tier 3 and Tier 4 NPCs and the reason why Tier 4 NPCs could trounce Tier 3 NPCs. It was also because of this mana domain that Saint's Hand had never dared stretch their hands towards Silverwing Town. After all, Silverwing Town had the protection of the Magic King Craig Midlands, who had already been promoted to Tier 4. In front of the Magic King, Tier 3 players would be one-shot kills. Now, out of the 300+ NPCs present, there were actually 3 NPCs with a mana domain. This meant that these 3 NPCs were only one short step away from Tier 4. Amazing. The harvest this time is massive. Faux himself was surprised by this outcome. Although there were no Tier 4 NPCs in the batch of recovered NPCs this time, just gaining 3 Tier 3 NPCs with a mana domain was plenty amazing already. After all, so long as these 3 NPCs received sufficient resources, reaching Tier 4 should be a shoo-in. Moreover, aside from these 3 NPCs, the quality of the other 300+ NPCs was considerably good as well. Of the other 300+ NPCs, 1 actually possessed growth potential at the Dark Gold rank, 11 at the Fine Gold rank, 151 at the Secret Silver rank, and the rest at the Mysterious Iron rank. In God's domain, NPCs that possessed growth potential at the Fine Gold rank or above could only be found by luck. Aqua Rose had already swept through the old and ailing NPCs of numerous countries once. The fact that they could obtain so many NPCs at the Dark Gold and Fine Gold standard in the second batch was truly incredible. After all, any random Tier 3 NPC at the Fine Gold rank could suppress current Tier 3 domain realm experts. Even the various superpowers would not possess more than a handful of such existences. Now Zerowing had just gained 15 of such NPCs. Moreover, 3 of them possessed a mana domain, of which 2 were at the Fine Gold rank and 1 was at the Dark Gold rank. If the various superpowers were to learn of this haul, they would definitely die of envy. Meanwhile, after a brief moment of silence in the hall, Faux turned his gaze toward the reserve main force members assembled before him. Alright, stop daydreaming. Line up according to the number assigned to you and start signing a contract with these NPCs. Faux said with a clap of his hands. Feng's words triggered an uproar among the gathered players. Crap. Is this for real? Even the weakest among these NPCs is at the Mysterious Iron rank, right? We can contract these NPCs as our personal guards? Everyone felt as if they were in a dream when they heard Feng's words. The fact that the guild could recruit so many powerful NPCs was already plenty amazing. Now, however, they were being told that they could have these NPCs as their personal guards. They couldn't believe their ears. The various first-rate guilds treated even Mysterious Iron guards as family heirlooms. Normally, only the guild elders would have the qualifications to contract such NPCs as personal guards. As for Secret Silver guards, they belonged to the guild leader and grand elders. Everyone else should not even think of obtaining them. Now, however, Zerowing was actually letting mere reserve members of its main force contract with Mysterious Iron guards and above. This situation was even more fabulous than if the guild had granted every one of them a level 100+ epic weapon. However, in no time at all, everyone snapped out of their daze and dashed forward to line up before Faux. As for the distribution of the NPCs, Faux first granted every player in line a Secret Silver NPC. As for the 2 Dark Gold NPCs, he assigned Melancholic Smile and Yulan 1 each. He also granted both of them and Liangjing 1 Fine Gold NPC each. This way, the 3 of them would no longer have to worry about their security when traveling around God's domain. As for the remaining Fine Gold NPCs, he assigned them to the 11 people in line who had made the most contributions to the guild. Upon seeing this, the other Zerowing members inevitably grew envious. That was a Fine Gold guard they were talking about. With the strength of a Fine Gold guard, one would not have to worry even when coming across a 100-man Tier 3 team. In fact, the Tier 3 team would most likely try to avoid the Fine Gold guard. This is wonderful. With the addition of these personal guards, we should have no problem withstanding the Faux Saint monster's attack. Yulan breathed out a sigh of relief when the distribution of the personal guards was over. Although Silverwing Town was only an advanced town, Zerowing had invested plenty of resources and funds into its development. While its defensive capability might not rival that of a guild city, its capability was not that far off either. Not to mention, the town also had 5 magic towers and a Tier 4 NPC protecting it. With the addition of so many Tier 3 personal guards, there shouldn't be any problem defending Silverwing Town from the Faux Saint monsters. Withstand. Faux shook his head at Yulan's sigh. Sneering, he continued, since they dare to come, then they shouldn't think of leaving anymore. After saying so, Faux tasked Yulan and Melancholic Smile with arranging Silverwing Town's defenses. As for himself, he made his way to Silverwing Town's Town Lord's mansion. Inside the control room of the Town Lord's mansion, Faux took out 600 mana stones and arranged them above the core magic array. The mana forging notes recorded plenty of powerful items. However, the highlight of the volume he received from Alba Grey was a special magic array capable of strengthening other magic arrays to whole new heights. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Of course, this improved strength did not come for free. The strengthening would triple the consumption of the target magic array. The target magic array would also take longer to recover naturally. However, compared to the possible benefits, this was a small price to pay. When Faux finished drawing the special magic array using the mana stones, a crimson pillar suddenly emerged from the core magic array. Following which, the sound of a system announcement suddenly entered Faux's ears. System: Silverwing Town has met the qualifications for promotion to a basic city. Do you wish to promote it to a basic city? Chapter 2668, Siege Battle at Silverwing Town. The town can be promoted just like that? Faux was surprised as he looked at the notification window at the corner of his vision. Although Silverwing Town was developing rapidly and its promotion to a basic city was only a matter of time, its attaining the promotion qualifications so soon caught him unawares. He never thought that there would be such a benefit to strengthening a town's core magic array. The defense of a basic city was significantly more substantial than that of an advanced town. The number of NPC guards one could hire would also undergo a qualitative transformation. This boost was especially advantageous for strongholds located in the Orc Empire. Recently, more and more players had started operating in the Orc Empire. Due to the very low number of player strongholds there, any stronghold that could ensure the safety of its players would become extremely popular, which would, in turn, guarantee its rapid development. However, despite receiving this unexpected boon, Faux did not choose to promote Silverwing Town yet. Instead, he focused on the crimson light pillar that had appeared at the center of the room. He then took out piles of magic crystals and started channeling the mana of the light pillar into Silverwing Town's various magic arrays. While upgrading Silverwing Town now would indeed raise its defensive capability by a significant margin, doing so would come at a great price. All the players inside the town would be teleported out of the town during the promotion process. With the Faux Saint army approaching, there was simply no time to upgrade Silverwing Town. Otherwise, Zero Wings members might have to fight the millions of Faux Saint monsters without the help of the city's defensive structures. Moreover, now that he had strengthened Silverwing Town's core magic array, its performance would surpass even that of the core magic arrays of ordinary basic cities. There was simply no need to take such a big risk. The rampaging mana inside the hall started flowing into the core magic array, together with the mana the magic crystals released. The core magic array then directed this mana into the various magic arrays throughout Silverwing Town, reinforcing them. 3 arrays, 6 arrays, 9 arrays. As Silverwing Town's magic arrays got strengthened one after another, the town's ambient mana changed. By the time half of Silverwing Town's magic arrays were strengthened, a layer of red mist had appeared above the town, enveloping it completely. Quick look. Why is there a red mist above the town? What's going on? Is this Zero Wings doing? It's highly possible. The ambient mana seems to have become slightly wilder. So long as we use this mana, the power of our skills and spells should increase substantially. With this, we should have an easier time repelling the Faux Saint army. The players in Silverwing Town quickly noticed the changes to the town's mana and could not help discussing them. Many of the adventurer team members preparing for battle relaxed slightly. Silverwing Town was one of the few player strongholds in the Orc Empire that were open to independent players. Hence, many independent players had decided to support Zero Wing against the approaching Faux Saint army. In addition, Zero Wing had also set up a contribution system for the players participating in the town's defense. Through this system, players could earn contribution points and exchange these points for rewards. Hence, even more independent players had chosen to stay and fight for Silverwing Town. It seems Black Flame isn't completely unprepared for this upcoming battle. Illusory Words, who currently stood on the town's wall, sighed in relief when she saw the red mist covering the town. After seeing Faux's previous performance against the Faux Saint Devourer, Crimson Emperor had decided to go all out in helping Zero Wing defend Silverwing Town. However, Illusory Words wasn't confident of success. After all, the Faux Saint monsters were simply too many. Moreover, even the weakest Faux Saint monster was at the Great Lord rank. The most they could do was persevere against the Faux Saint monster's assault. That was right. Persevere. With their current forces, repelling the Faux Saint army would be impossible. All they could do was persevere. Fortunately, Faux had killed the Faux Saint Devourer. With this, even the strongest Faux Saint monster remaining would be only at the Grand Lord rank. Silverwing Town's defensive magic array would have no problem tanking the hits of Grand Lords. Meanwhile, so long as they ensured the continuous replenishment of the energy reserves of the town's defensive magic array before they got depleted, the Faux Saint monsters would not be able to take even a single step into Silverwing Town. With the intellect of those Faux Saint monsters, they wouldn't bother wasting too much time on a single task. After seeing that they couldn't break through the town's defensive magic array even after several days, they would naturally retreat. It seems Black Flame has quite a few tricks up his sleeves. He's actually able to make the town's mana go berserk. With this, the strength of the town's defensive magic array should have increased by quite a bit. While the town's defensive magic array has indeed been improved, it will still need to withstand all those Faux Saint destroyers. You should know that Faux Saint monsters have destroyed NPC cities before. What can a guild town possibly do against an army of them? The various superpowers members hidden inside the town disdained the transformation to Silverwing Town's mana. They also considered Feng very foolish. While the performance of the town's defensive magic array had indeed improved significantly, there was still a limit to the magic array's energy reserves. Faced with the attacks of tens of thousands of Grand Lord-ranked Faux Saint destroyers, how long could the magic array's energy reserves possibly last? Even the defensive magic arrays of NPC cities had fallen swiftly before the Faux Saint monsters. In fact, many of these NPC cities also had a large number of level 150 NPC guards and a level 180 tier 3 magistrate to defend them. In the end, the Faux Saint monsters still managed to drain the defensive magic array's energy reserves and destroyed the cities. Shortly after Silverwing Town's transformation, news of it quickly reached the Fire Dragon Empire's Flame Dragon City. Interesting. Since he's able to agitate the mana of a town to increase the performance of the town's defensive magic array, it seems he didn't defend those Faux Saint monsters in Saint's Hand without any forethought. A smirk appeared on Cold Shadow's face when she read the report she just received. What a pity. This development might have posed a problem for those Faux Saint monsters in Saint's Hand a few days ago, but it is futile now. After Cold Shadow said so, she turned her gaze to the video livestream playing before her. What this livestream showed was none other than the Faux Saint army that was marching towards Silverwing Town and was currently within 5,000 yards of Silverwing Town already. The monsters were so numerous that they covered all the land around Silverwing Town. From what she could see, there were easily more than 100,000 Faux Saint destroyers there, almost double the initial projections. Moreover, aside from the Faux Saint destroyers, there were also quite a few gigantic figures moving amidst this army, and the other Faux Saint monsters clustered around these gigantic figures. At this moment, White Feather entered the VIP room Cold Shadow occupied and said respectfully, "Vice Guild Leader, the various superpowers representatives have arrived already. Should we head over now?" "All right, let's go." Cold Shadow nodded. She then dismissed the video playing before her and left the Scorching Flame restaurant. At the same time, the players standing guard atop Silverwing Town's walls were dumbfounded by the sight before them. How is this possible? No. This can't be real. This must be a joke. When the players standing on the walls looked at the massive army before them, despair and reluctance overwhelmed them. There were 8 mythic-ranked Faux Saint Devourers. Is this the strength that Saint's Hand has been relying on all this time? Illusory Words, who similarly stood on the town's wall, could not help a bitter smile when she saw the 8 Faux Saint Devourers. She had anticipated that Saint's Hand had kept a trump card hidden. Otherwise, it wouldn't have had the confidence to take action so close to Silverwing Town, nor would it have put its precious mythic-ranked Faux Saint Devourer at such great risk. However, she never thought that Saint's Hand had actually managed to produce so many Faux Saint Devourers already. At this moment, even the various spectating superpowers were stunned by this situation. Too strong. The Faux Saint army boasted not only over 100,000 Faux Saint destroyers but also 8 Faux Saint Devourers. With such a force, let alone destroying Silverwing Town, even capturing one of Starmoon Kingdom's main cities wouldn't be a problem. After all, the only real threat in main city-ranked NPC cities was the level 180 Tier 4 magistrates tasked with defending them. As for the remaining level 150 NPCs that were at Tier 2 or Tier 3, while they did pose a problem, they weren't undefeatable. At the same time, several thousand players wearing the guild emblem of Saint's Hand were hiding in a forest several thousand yards away from Silverwing Town. Among them, 1,000 magical class players were currently drawing a gigantic and complex magic array, which constantly drew on the ambient mana and reduced its density. Black Flame. I'll show you just how foolish your previous actions are and make you regret everything you've done. Thousand Eyes, who currently radiated an extremely weak aura, sneered as he looked at the Silverwing town displayed on the magic mirror before him. No, I should say that you won't even have time to regret. Your Silverwing town will turn to dust before you know it. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Meanwhile, inside Silverwing Town's Town Lord's mansion, while Faux was quietly inspecting the performance of the town's strengthened magic arrays through the core magic array, Yulan burst into the room with an ugly expression on her face. Guild leader, according to the information we received from the walls, aside from over 100,000 Faux Saint destroyers, the Faux Saint army this time also has 8 Faux Saint devourers, Yulan said in a grim tone as she gazed at Faux.